what we're signing up for. I just suggested tonight. Right. Well, Dave became aware of us. Third talk. And I'm saying, I'm interested in knowing more about it. We've been in the business. Maybe you could help us expand within the city and help our cause. We would love to talk to you. And we'd love to help Vanis. As soon as we heard that, this is wonderful. This might mean he's interested in helping his business, which would help Project Hope, which is all. From that, it turned into wonderful. So a lot of his customers are here. The big customer right behind us is here. We're all in the back row that we're all here, and it's been 3 years now. This Project Hope Alliance is 2.5 years ago. We suggested that helping the environment is wonderful and something we've always done. But to recycle and the environment, let's do more. We talked about charities. I said, find one that you like. So just went on the internet and we found one. Helps kids. You can relate to that. It helps kids. That's what I want to do. So before we signed up, we met the executive director, we met the school, we met the children, we met the staff. Years. That's the one that supports. Correct. Donation 25% of all proceeds from the recycling efforts directly to Well, I'm one thing I'm excited, but mostly
this way or not?
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Roll call, please.
The record will reflect all members of council are present.
Mr. City Attorney, is there a closed session report?
Yes, there is. In regards to closed session item A, conference with legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation, Councilmember Selich recused himself from that item, and the unanimous decision of the City Council was to inform Mr. Barrick that no action will be taken in regards to his request because there was no violation of the Brown Act.
Thank you very much. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Councilmember Daigle, and then please remain standing for the invocation, which will be led by Mr. Frank Carpenter. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty.
Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this fair city and for these citizens and public servants who've joined us here tonight. We thank you for the promise of the new year and of this new facility. Give us wisdom and patience as we work with one another, and make us excellent stewards of all the blessings and resources entrusted to us. Amen.
Please be seated. We are very fortunate to have a delegation of great friends, people, many of whom I had the opportunity to meet when I visited Okazaki in 2009, from our sister city, who are here with us today. We want to welcome them to Newport Beach and invite them to come forward. So please welcome our delegation from our sister city, Okazaki, Japan. Did you wish to come forward? Wait, David?
Did Mr. Ota wish to make some comments?
Mr. Ota, this side, please. The other microphone.
That one will work.
It'll work.
It'll work. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to move it towards you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 皆さんこんばんは。私たちはニューポート地の姉妹都市である岡崎から参りました。私たちは岡崎市国際交流会主催の市民ツアー、友好の翼のメンバーです。今日はこのグループの団長として、一言ご挨拶を申し上げます。
My name is Mr. Ota, and today I brought, excuse me, I am president of Okazaki International Group, and then I brought member of Okazaki International Group tonight, and then もう終わりました。
まず今日大変な貴重な時間をいただきましたことをお礼を申し上げるとともに、私たちを紹介していただきましたことを大変光栄に恩じてございます。ありがとうございました。また昨年12月に完成した新しい議場にできたことは大変嬉しく思っております。
Thank you very much for making a special introduction, Mayor, of us and delegate here, and I'm very privileged to be here tonight, especially in this brand new facility just opened and finished. Excuse me.
1984年にニューポートビーチと岡崎市が姉妹都市を結びましたが、それから28年経ちました。この間に中学生の皆さんの総合交流を岡崎市とこの市の間で行って、約250年、またニューポート市からは430人の方が岡崎にお見えになって、約1200名の方が市民交流を重ねてまいりました。
Our relationship, sister city relationship, started 28 years ago. During this time, we exchanged 250 students from Newport Beach to Okazaki and 470 students from Okazaki to Newport Beach, and total 12,000, close to 12,000
ニューポートビーチ市の皆さん方の協力がなければ、この交流も続かなかったと私は思います。岡崎市国際交流協会としましても、これまでの皆様方が岡崎に来られて、時の受け入れについて、交流事業に一生懸命、貢献をさせていただきました。
This relationship lasted because from citizens' support and both cities' support, and we from Okazaki at the Okazaki International Group, we did our best to this effort.
さて、来たる2014年には岡崎市と木市が姉妹都市を結んでから30年になります。私たちは今回の目的の一つは、次の30年に向けて岡崎市民の意識の高揚を高めることであります。この場を借りてニューポート市と市の皆さん方と岡崎市をもっと知っていただいて、より多くの方が岡崎を訪れていただくことを期待をし、また市民レベルの交流がもっともっと続くことを願っております。
Main purpose of our visit today is our sister city relationship expect to have 30th year in 2014, and we would like to bring out citizens' awareness from Okazaki side, and at the same time, I would like to invite many citizens could visit to Okazaki for this special 30th anniversary event. Thank you.
幸い、昨年12月に就任されましたカリー市長さんは、提携25周年の2009年に岡崎を訪問され、家康行列に奥様と共に参加をされました。私もカリー市長様にお会いでき大変嬉しく思っております。ぜひカリー市長さんの力を借りて2014年にニューポートビーチと岡崎市が素晴らしい年になるように努力をしていきたいと思っています。
2 years ago, I believe, he says, we received new mayor, Mr. Curry, visited Okazaki City, and then with his wife, they took part in special parade, special occasion, and this is my second time to be able to meet Mr. Curry tonight, and I'm so happy to have this kind of meeting, and then let's, from both sides, for year 2014, will make a more memorable occasion, and then let's keep our good sister city relationship for many years to come.
ニューポート市のますますのご発展と両市の友好関係がずっと続くことを願って私の挨拶とさせていただきます。Thank you very much.
Thank you.
He said, in closing, I sincerely wishes good progress in city of Newport Beach, and then our relationship will prosper as well. Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you. And
Mr. Mayor, I do believe they wanted to exchange a memento with you and then probably get a photograph with the mayor and the delegation. And
delegate wants to present little memento to each city council member.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. I remember you. Yes, thank you. As was mentioned, this relationship now goes back more than 28 years. It was originally organized by the Rotary clubs in each city, by Mr. Kato in Japan and by Wendell Fish here in Newport Beach. And it is one of the most worthwhile things that we do as a city. If you've never been to Okazaki, it is a beautiful city, an imperial capital with a shogun's castle, cherry blossom festival. I do a wonderful festival with samurai warriors in April. And I encourage all of you to get involved with the Sister City Association and take advantage of the opportunity to visit.
Mr. Mayor,
such a
they've
marvelous
also
place.
beautified our city with a sculpture and part of Irvine Park Terrace.
Indeed.
Irvine Terrace Park has some trees and other things there. We're very grateful to all they've done for us.
Very, very much so, very much. Thank you all very much, and have a wonderful time while you're still in Newport Beach. Enjoy your visit. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you. Our next presentation, we're all in for a real treat. You know, Newport Beach is the home of some great entrepreneurs, and the one tonight is a particularly young but I think very outstanding entrepreneur who's going to make a presentation tonight. So let me invite Vanis Buckholz to the podium to speak to us tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanis Buckholz. I am 10 years old, live in CDM, and I'm a 4th grader at Harborview. When I was 7, I created My Recycler, which is a recycling business that helps the environment and underprivileged kids. I want to thank you, Mr. Kiff, for inviting me here. He wanted me to talk about 3 things: how my business started, how it works, and how I am helping others, which is the most important thing. My business started when I learned about recycling at school on Earth Day. I thought it was something I should do. My parents said we should start at home. I was really surprised at how much stuff we threw away. After a while, I began to save recyclables for other family members and friends. Then I started collecting for a lot of my neighbors. And that's when the business started to grow. The idea for my business name came from cycling around town, picking up trash on our beach, streets, parks, and hauling it home to recycle. My mom and dad taught me to never pollute, so picking up trash was something we always did, but now it's part of the business. To make my job easier, my parents bought me a trailer for my bike. I wanted a business card like my dad's. He said I could have one if I designed it myself. He used my exact drawing. I loved it and passed it around to a few businesses in town. Everyone liked it, and now businesses were recycling for me too. How my business works. I recycle glass, plastic, aluminum, and loose paper. I pick up my customers' recyclables at their homes or businesses. I ride my bike and trailer to my customers in town, and my parents drive me to the far ones. I like to tell my customers it's a dirty job, but someone has to do it. I use OC Recycling in Santa Ana, and I take a full truckload every couple of weeks. The most important part is helping others. As my business grew, my parents said that I should do more than just help the environment. They taught me about charities, and I found one that helps homeless kids. It's called Project Hope Alliance. We visited their school, met the people who worked there, and the kids who really needed our help. I've been helping them ever since. With the money that I make from recycling, I give 25% to Project Hope. 25% is used to run my business, and the rest I have to save. I want to say thanks to all the council members for having me here. And I would like to say thanks to all the customers for supporting me, especially to all the local businesses, the Oasis, Newport Workout, Newport Coast Community Center, Nature Center, Young Seconds, Sophie Love, our post office and CDM, and Thinkin' Big Communications. They have an employee that brings me her recyclables all the way from Hollywood. I always tell my new customers that every little bit matters. Even one bottle helps. I love my job and my customers. I'm a very lucky kid, but there's a lot of kids who aren't so lucky. If you want to join My Recycler and help me help other kids, please contact me anytime. My website is myrecycler.org. If you see me around town doing my job, feel free to toss a water bottle in my trailer. Thank you, everybody.
There you go. It's a special cities are made up of special people, and Vanis, you are certainly that for Newport Beach. Thank you for making that presentation. We're going to come down and get a photo. Okay, another thing that makes our city special. Notice to the public.
The city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the city council. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium. The city council welcomes and encourages community participation. Public comments are generally limited to 3 minutes per person to allow everyone to speak. Written comments are encouraged as well. The City Council has a discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones off or set them in the silent mode. Now is the time for council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Thank you. Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, a couple things going on. The library and the Library Foundation are going to be offering a kids program beginning in March. They're going to be having cooking classes. The instructor is a chef, and the kitchen is going to be the kitchen at 5 Crowns. So pretty fancy stuff. When I think of 5 Crowns, I always think creme brulee, prime rib. So let's see what our kids can cook up. And then secondly is everyone should consider signing up for the police department's Nixle crime alert system. It's an electronic system. It comes from your email, and you can learn exactly what's happening in your neighborhood in terms of alerts. And so I think they're going to flash a sign on the television set as to where you can sign up. And I think it's something that could save a life and protect some property. So I'd encourage you to take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had the very distinct pleasure, along with Councilmember Hill, to attend a firefighters promotional ceremony on Thursday, January the 17th, in the old City Council chambers, the last one to be held there. It was quite a crowd. There was 10 firefighters, I believe, that either were newly pinned with their badges or promoted in one respect or another, and it's always such a nice occasion to be there with their families, fathers, grandparents, daughters, wives, and it was just a really nice event. Next, I'd like to make sure that everyone is aware that we're going to have our annual Mayor's Dinner. This is sponsored by Speak Up Newport. It will be Friday, February the 8th at 5:30 p.m. at the Newport Beach Marriott, and we'll be able to hear our new mayor tell us about his feelings about the plans for our city going forward, and be able to look at a lot of old mayors along the way. So I encourage everyone to attend. I'm not sure how many tickets are yet available, but if you can, it's a fun evening. That's it. Thanks.
Mr. Selich.
No announcements this evening.
Councilmember Gardner.
Was that directed at me, old mayors? Yeah. No announcement.
I thought about that as I said it.
Mr. Petros.
No announcements.
Mr. Hill.
No further announcements.
Just a couple of announcements here. Until the 27th of January, we're still in the middle of Restaurant Week, which means if you're sitting at home on the couch watching this, you do have the option of taking your wife and going out and enjoying a great dinner at a great value at a marvelous Newport Beach restaurant this very evening. And if you choose not to, I'm not making any promises for the rest of the evening for your entertainment. But before the week is over, go out and enjoy, try a new Newport Beach restaurant. You'll get great value as part of this, and you'll really enjoy it. I had the opportunity along this week to participate in the police promotions. And while we only had one officer being promoted, it once again renewed my faith in the quality and really the superb men and women who make up our Newport Beach Police Department. I'm very, very proud of all of them. Earlier this month, we held at the Oasis Center our annual goal-setting session. All of the council members were there with good ideas and exciting ideas for things we're going to be doing in the course of the next year. And I think you'll be very pleased with how we push forward to revitalize our neighborhoods, to manage our budget, to better protect our environment and our community, to make the kind of investments that we need for generations in Newport Beach, and to continue to run our city efficiently and effectively. It was also good to use that time to look back at what we had accomplished over the course of 2012. We sometimes forget how much actually got done until we take those moments to stop and look back, and it was very impressive. Many of you probably saw this week that the 2012 crime statistics were released, and I'm very proud of our chief and our entire police department, and especially about our community, because crime went down again 3.4% overall in Newport Beach. Crime is now at an all-time low. It's at the lowest point it's ever been since they've been doing modern statistical analysis of crime rates. Now, crime is down generally across the country, but it's beginning to move up in parts of Southern California and other parts of the country. That's because the state's released so many prisoners from state prison back to county jurisdictions. That's an issue that the chief of police and I and the entire council is watching very carefully to make sure that we don't reverse this 40-year trend. But again, you should be very proud of the men and women of the Newport Beach Police Department who have achieved this accomplishment, again, at an all-time low in terms of crime. I also had the opportunity this week to speak to our Youth Commission. From Sage Hill, Corona Del Mar, and Newport Harbor High, we just have an outstanding group of young people. You saw one here tonight, but we have several on the Youth Commission who gather together to think about how they can make this a better city for Newport Beach, to serve the community. And again, they're just part of the many, many dozens of local residents who spend time every week thinking about how to make Newport Beach a better place. I am very proud of all of them and the service that they give to the city, particularly because I started as a youth commissioner 40-some years ago. A couple of other things I'd like to comment about. I normally don't publicize my own events, but this one's free, so you all can come February 27th, we're having an all-day event at Concordia University about how to reduce a DUI. Drunk driving is a real scourge in California, and particularly in Newport Beach because of the concentration of bars that we have. So in conjunction with the Auto Club, Orange County, and Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and Concordia, we're going to have an all-day session talking about strategies that can be used in cities to reduce DUI, to keep this problem from becoming even a bigger danger to our community than it is. That's at the Concordia University in Irvine, and I encourage you to come out. It's an all-day event, 8 to 5. And then finally, this last weekend, I had the great honor to represent our city at the United States Conference of Mayors in Washington, D.C. Nearly 300 mayors from across America, everybody from Michael Bloomberg and Antonio Villaraigosa and Rahm Emanuel, well, to me, quite a gamut there. But to have a chance with other mayors from across America to talk about the problems that face cities overall. A lot of focus on the dangers of guns in our communities and strategies of what mayors can do to address that. I had the opportunity to listen to the Vice President talk about his ideas at length, by the way, on this topic, along with Senator Feinstein and Mayor Bloomberg from New York and Governor Malloy, the governor of Connecticut, and his experiences in dealing with the tragedy at Newtown. I had the opportunity to personally talk to David Agnew from the White House and thank him for the support that the administration has provided to the dredging of Newport Harbor and to encourage him to keep it up. I spent a lot of time talking with mayors on the arts. Mayor Mitch Landrieu from New Orleans, the mayor of Santa Fe, Joe Riley, the dean of mayors, been mayor something like 40 years from Charleston, South Carolina, about how they use arts in their communities to enhance economic development and to make it a better and more livable place to be. I spent some time with Mayor Greg Ballard from Indianapolis talking about how they're shifting to non-gasoline burning vehicles in Indianapolis to get away from dependence on foreign oil. And I did spend some time with several California mayors, including Chuck Reed from San Jose, to talk about pension reform. And there I was pleased that Newport Beach is on the cutting edge. As we will see today when we adopt some of the items on our agenda, people are learning from us about how to reduce pension costs. So all in all, it was great to share ideas. I did have an opportunity to attend a reception sponsored by the National Sister City Group, and you saw the value that that group brings to our city here. So a good trip all in all. So next, we are going to look at the consent calendar. Let me first ask council members if there is any item that they wish to have removed from the consent calendar, and we'll start with Councilmember Gardner. Mr. Petros. Mr. Hill.
Nothing.
Councilmember Daigle.
None to remove, but I did want to express my appreciation of item number 3, and that's the completion of traffic signal equipment at East Bluff and Ford Road. And I'm also looking forward to the continuation of this project as the city opens its traffic operations center at City Hall, and definitely hope that we optimize all of this equipment and it becomes well utilized. So thank you.
Mr. Hand.
I have nothing.
Selich.
No items.
And I have no items to pull. Does staff have any items to pull? Or I think, Mr. Harp, I think you have a notation to make.
Yes, in regards to the minutes from last meeting, closed session item A, conference with real property negotiators regarding the 10 properties that are listed there, should reflect that Councilmember Henn recused himself from participation in that portion of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Hill.
I would move the consent.
Wait, not yet.
All right,
We
sorry.
have a new way of doing business. So, at this point, I would invite public comment on items not pulled from the consent calendar. No items were pulled, so it's on any item from the consent calendar. You have 3 minutes for comments. Please come to the podium if you have any comments.
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. First, with respect to item 1 that Mr. Harp just spoke about, in addition to the change he recommended, there is an amended copy of the minutes in the lobby, and I hope you will clarify in your motion which version you are adopting. Next, I would like to call your attention and the public's to item 2, which formerly required the city clerk to announce by title when you're adopting ordinances and resolutions. Now it is only ordinances. I think most of the public is already considerably in the dark about what you're passing when you vote. And I believe now that when you say, I move the recommended action, they will be even more in the dark, which is perhaps what you and they want. Next, I would like to comment on item 4, which authorizes $250,000 a year for the next 2 years for undefined on-call landscape design services, apparently without any further oversight. Although I believe we have a very good city staff, I regard this as something like giving a blank check or a credit card to a shopaholic. The city's own policy defines on-call contracts as being appropriate for minor recurring work in which individual jobs are too small to justify a separate contract, such as minor electrical repairs. $500,000 of the public's money seems an awfully large amount to be spending on little nickel and dime jobs like that over 2 years. The practice of open-ended on-call contracts with business friends is one I have noted particularly abused by the city's attorney's office, where with no obvious oversight, contracts are routinely entered into for undefined legal services with no time and no dollar limits, which leads me to item 8, which is a new employment contract for that very city attorney, giving him a 3% raise retroactive to last September. I would have felt more comfortable with this if the council had chosen to share with us the goals it set for the city attorney and whether he has achieved them or not, and also the new conditions that might qualify him for a raise in the future. What I find most interesting about the new agreement is that you appear to be backtracking on your previous consent to giving lifetime contracts to key city employees, with this now having been reduced from a lifetime contract to a fixed 2-year term, albeit a so-called evergreen term that requires 13 months' notice to terminate. If we've come to recognize that lifetime contracts are not in the city's best interest, I'm wondering if some of the other contracts with that provision should be revisited as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the consent calendar? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Laura Curran. I live in Newport Beach. I'd like to comment on agenda item number 4, which is the approval of amendment number 1 to the on-call professional services agreements with TCLA and David Peterson. This item calls for an increase in the professional landscaping contract for 2 contractors, as Mr. Mosier referenced. As per the report, staff recommends increasing the maximum amount of compensation to the consultants from $120,000 to $250,000 through the term of the agreements. The current fee schedule for each consultant will remain unchanged. The fee schedule was not included. So together, these 2 contracts total $500,000. The issue I had with this report is that the report doesn't discuss or describe what projects these consultants have worked on before, what projects they're going to be assigned to. Are they existing projects or new projects? How many city staff are going to be working on those related projects? Who will supervise these contractors, and why contractors are required instead of city staff? So we're spending $500,000, but it's not really clear why. Especially, it's just not clear why. The city has landscape and landscape maintenance staff that are knowledgeable about plants and landscaping, and a lot of the projects that are done in the city, however, such as medians, repeat the same plants. We have new medians at the bridge over Jamboree and on Irvine, which are essentially things that starts with P, like palm trees and plumerias. On the other hand, we have projects like Coastal Peak Park and City Hall Park, which take a lot of expertise, and sometimes outside expertise is warranted with extensive oversight by staff. So again, this $500,000 expenditure may be worthwhile, but as a resident, I went through the report, I read it, I don't understand what we're getting when we spend $500,000 to hire Mr. Peterson and TCLA. And I can't make a meaningful assessment if the staff and the council are being good shepherds of our money. So I would ask the council and staff to provide an explanation of these contracts in this forum and in future staff reports so that we as residents and businesses can better understand what our money is being spent on and what we're getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the consent calendar? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back and ask for motion.
I would move the consent calendar with the amendments to the minutes as have been suggested.
Your second?
I'll second that.
Okay, please vote.
How?
Okay, please proceed. Promise it'll work on the next one. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have one question and one comment. I think that Ms. Curran was absolutely right. We get to a certain point and we sort of go on a cycle, and pretty soon our consent calendar items become more and more, they're cryptic in a sense, they're very brief. And then we bring it up and there's confusion. So I think that we do need to be more fulsome in some of these items. It's hard, I know, because you know the material so well, whoever's writing it, that it's hard to remember that some of the rest of us aren't in your mind, so a little more detail would be welcome. The second thing is, when we redid our agenda and when we were going to have things, we decided that the public could not pull items from the consent calendar. I just, for some reason, thought that we would take their public comments first before we polled the council, so that if someone said something there that we hadn't thought of, we would have that opportunity? Or do we see it as just simply, then we would go back and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't think about that, and now I will call that? It's just a procedural thing, but...
The idea is if a council member pulls something, they have an opportunity to talk about it when that item comes up.
Okay.
And if it's not pulled, then they talk about it when it's collective.
But if I said I had nothing to pull, and somebody said something on this, oh yeah, I still had the ability to pull it then.
Yes, when Mr. Hill, for example, made his motion, you could have asked that item, pick a number, it could have been separated out.
Thank you for that.
Okay. All righty. We're now at public comments on non-agenda items. Clerk? Leilani, are you going to read your announcement?
Hi, my name's Laura Curran. I'd like to make a public comment on a non-agenda item, and I'd kind of call this the second $500,000 expenditure for the night. So I'd like to refer back to an item from October 9th. On October 9th, the city reviewed a request for the expenditure for the new City Hall new City Hall facility for the furniture at the library. And the furniture included custom-made library carrels, task chairs, desk carrel chairs, conference room tables, chairs, soft seating and reading areas, and cafe furniture. Because I heard and read we're going to get coffee in the library, so that'll be fun. So a lot of these items, particularly the carrels, were custom-made. And as is usual in Newport, they're probably going to be very attractive and well-used. So on October 9th, the council approved the purchase of the furniture from Montblow Associates for a not-to-exceed price of $210,000, and purchase of additional furniture from Pivot Interiors for not-to-exceed $223,000, along with some other things like ceiling fabric, so a total of $500,000. And in my world, that's a lot of money for furniture. And these are all items that we need in a library, of course. But here's my concern. The staff report did not include a quantity breakdown of the furniture items or a cost per item. So again, thinking back to that theme of when a reader's reading this, what questions are we asking? At the time, that day, I asked Mr. Hook, the finance manager, and Steve Batum for information about how many pieces of furniture were being purchased. And Mr. Batum helpfully advised me that this information was not in the staff report, nor was the PO due to last-minute changes. The PO hadn't been attached because they were making some changes. So I asked for this information later, and I have not yet received it. Staff is generally very helpful with these requests, and we appreciate it. But there, again, is a bigger theme. As a resident or a business, we rely on the staff reports for information about purchases and contracts. I personally would like to know how much the chairs and the furniture cost, how much of the furniture was custom made, how much did it cost for each piece of furniture. Because with that type of information, then we could have a sense of, did we pay below market rate, at market rate, above market rate? How did we make decisions about the vendors that we chose? And what is their track record in terms of providing materials for libraries? So this type of information should be available and easily accessible in a staff report so that we don't have to call and ask, especially on a $131 million project such as the City Hall, where funds are coming from a lot of accounts. So in closing, I just ask if this information is now available to the public, and I thank you for the completion of this report's often in real time, trying to gather a lot of information. It's a hard job, but at the same time, we rely on them, and we ask you to keep that in mind as we look at them and prepare to understand how our money and funds are being spent in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Council, and good evening, audience, and everybody out in TV land. I'm here again to talk about climate change. My name is Mark Tabbert, and I'm in Newport Beach, and I'm part of the Citizens Climate Lobby, the Orange County chapter. The purpose of our group is to try to create the political will for a stable climate. After our meeting last week, 2 weeks ago Tuesday, I met with Dana Rohrabacher in his office and had a very positive meeting. He's invited my group, which is about 15 people now, to meet and talk further about that issue. If Dana Rohrabacher is willing to talk about climate change, after some of the things that he's recorded to have said, although he says he's been misquoted many times, it gives me hope that someday that the council will sit down and look at this subject like many cities are. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to do a quick description tonight of 6 Americans. Everybody in this room is one of 6 Americans according to a study at Yale University. And I'm asking everybody to think about which American you are. I'll start out, and this is a study about opinions about climate change. I'm part of a group called Alarmed. I'm part of 16% of Americans that see climate change as a serious issue caused by human beings, something needs to be done, and we're eager to get on to a solution. The next group of people, according to Yale, is about 29% of the American public, and these people are, they call them concerned. They believe it's a serious problem. They think it's caused by human beings. But they see the problem as something more distant. They see it in space in terms of, distant in terms of space or time. So it's a polar bear problem, or it's a future problem. It's not something today. The next group of people are the people that are on the fence. I think they call them the cautious people. They're considering climate change. They don't know if it's serious or overblown. They don't know if it's caused by humans or if it's natural. And they're on the fence on those kind of issues. The next group is a very small group. It's people that have heard of climate change but don't know anything about it. It's only 8% of the population. It's people that have heard of climate change, but if you ask them any question about it, they say, I don't know. I don't know anything about that. There are 2 more groups that we call doubtful. These are pretty small groups. The first group is 13%, and these are people that do not believe in climate change. They don't think if it's happening, it's not caused by man, there's nothing we can do about it. They just tend to be non-believers. They haven't studied it, they don't pay much attention to it. And the last group of people is about 8% of the population that are dismissive of the subject. They look at the subject as if it's a hoax, as if the scientists in the world have gotten together and created this fiction that climate change is a problem. They're the ones that have dominated the public stage for the past so many years.
Thank you, Mark. Are there other public speakers? Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. My name is Paul Glowinky, Corona Del Mar. I'm here to say thanks to the Island Hotel for hosting the Children's Hospital Orange County Gala, which happened on Saturday evening. I was privileged enough to attend. For those of you who don't know, I'm the chairman of the Professional Advisors Council, and I'm also encouraging the City Council members to celebrate the gift of Mr. Bill Holmes, longtime Newport Beach resident. Mr. Holmes granted a charitable gift to Children's Hospital in the amount of $27 million, which puts them well over the top on their $125 million grant effort or gift effort over the last 2 years. And because Chalk works so closely with Hogue, and Hogue is such a vital part of Newport Beach, I want to extend an invitation to all City Council members to attend the tower opening, which is on February 2nd at noon. I'll send an email invitation to each of you, but I would encourage each of you to seek out Mr. Holmes and thank him personally. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Hello, Mayor Curry. My name is George Schroeder, and most of you know I'm on the board of directors of Speak Up Newport. I want to thank Councilman Henn for mentioning our mayor's dinner that is going to be held on February 8th at the Marriott Hotel. It is our 32nd mayor's dinner. Those of you at home who did get an invitation and have it on top of your refrigerator, bad news is we are entirely sold out. So the good news is save the invitation, but write 2014 on it. And next year, please respond earlier. We did have a record number of underwriters this year. We actually had to turn a couple away, so we want to thank everybody for their support. And those of you that do get to attend, we look forward to having a fantastic time. I am a co-chair again this year along with Joe Vanderford and Kathy Harrison, so I just want to make sure those two ladies get the appreciation they deserve for all the hard work we're putting in. So thank you very much, and those of you who attend, we look forward to having a spectacular evening. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Are there any other public comments? Okay, thank you very much. Next item is oral reports from council members on committee activities. Councilmember Gardner.
I have nothing.
Petros.
None.
Mr. Hill.
No report, thank you.
Ms. Daigle.
We did have the 794th meeting of the Vector Control. They're very proud of that. And we're working closely with them on some mosquito problems down at Big Canyon. It's actually the hotbed of the county, those mosquitoes there. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henn.
Yes, we've had a meeting of the Balboa Village Advisory Committee that was held at the Exploration offices on the peninsula in Balboa Village. That was on Wednesday, January the 9th. And we had 3 agenda items of significance. The first was to consider, and ultimately we did recommend to council, a commercial parking management program for Balboa Village. And that's actually on our agenda for consideration this evening, along with the residential parking program approved at a previous meeting. And we reviewed our 2013 work program schedule and approved that, and appointed a subcommittee for helping with staff's efforts to move forward our commercial facade program, that portion of our agenda. And so it was another good meeting. I think we're 2 for 2 on good meetings, and we're continuing to move along quite nicely with that group. And then we also had a meeting of the TIDELANDS Management Committee, which I did not attend, but which I'll summarize the agenda for. At that meeting was held on Wednesday, January the 16th, over at Oasis. And there were 3 items of significance, including a recommendation that will be coming to council shortly to segregate harbor fee increases for use on harbor-related projects, to find a mechanism that will give some assurance that the increased money that are being raised in the harbor through these fee increases will be put to good use for the benefit of the users of the harbor. And then we also had a presentation on a new, not a new idea, I guess, an idea for controlling sea level rise in our harbor, which essentially is to place a barrier across the entrance to our harbor, as is done in other cities, I believe, Amsterdam?
Venice.
Amsterdam and Venice, and et cetera. I understand that turns out to be quite an expensive undertaking, and but it's good to hear those kinds of presentations, I'm sure. And then there was also some amount of discussion on the idea of expanding our consideration for other user fees for the harbor. And as I was not at the meeting, if Councilmember Selich or Councilmember Gardner would have anything to add to that?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay. All right, then, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your leadership in Balboa Village, by the way. That's moving along very well. Mr. Selich.
No reports this evening.
And I have no reports. So now we'll go to public hearings. Item number 10, the Woody's Wharf use permit appeal. It's recommended to continue this to March 12th.
Mr. Mayor, because I own property within 500 feet of this, I've been advised that I must recuse myself even on the discussion of postponing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hill. It is recommended to be continued to March 12th. With that in mind, is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak on this matter tonight? All right, seeing none, I'll bring it back. Do I need to open a public hearing to take this motion, Mr. City Attorney?
You should open up to public comment on the continuance.
All right, well, we'll open the public hearing. We've asked for public comment. Seeing none on the continuance, is there a motion to continue this item?
I'll move the item.
Second. Second. Seeing any further discussion, please vote. Hey.
With that, with the council member, Mayor Pro Tem Hill recusing himself, the motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move to item 11, Amendment to Newport Beach Municipal Code, Master Fee Resolution related to commercial and non-commercial tidelands uses and non-commercial implementation.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor,
rather. I have to recuse myself from this item. I've been advised by the city attorney, since I have a residential pier, that I have a potential conflict of interest.
Thank you, Mr. Selich. Mr. Kiff, is there a staff report?
A brief verbal report, Mr. Mayor and council members.
I'll wait for Mr. Selich there.
So this item is a follow-up to your action in December. This item is specifically relating to a handful of different things. One would amend the municipal code to say that, among other things, residential piers could be rented out. Second, it would adopt a resolution removing the $100, call it the remedial or inspection fee that would have applied to any pier. It will remove that, and for instance, those folks who would have a pier on county tidelands or private waterways or something similar to that would no longer pay that. And then the third major thing that this does is it sets up an appeal process for folks who might disagree with, at least initially, the city's calculation of the square footage under tidelands rental. So Michael Torres has worked on this a lot. If Michael will let me know if I missed anything, and you have the staff report in front of you, and certainly welcome your questions. Michael, you have any?
No, that's correct. The only other thing it does is establish a $100 appeal fee for that new independent appeal that's being established tonight.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Yes, Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, several questions. I was looking at the different actions, and it talks about rescinding the inspection fee. And it's my understanding the fee was established, I don't know, sometime in the 1990s. Is that correct? $100 a year per dock?
I don't know the exact date, but yeah, but it's been on the books for a while.
So it's been going for a good 15 years, and residents are paying, dock owners, paying $100 a year, $100,000 a year based on 1,000 docks. So it's about $1.5 million the city's collected. How has the city conducted this program of inspections?
It's done through the Harbor Resources Office and Chris Miller and his staff, and it's, as you said, it's an inspection fee. So that's the charge the city uses when we go out to make sure it's up to the code, it's up to standards. It's part of the transfer process. It allows us to keep our database of knowing which piers are out there and what condition they are, and for issuing, at least electronically, a permit every year of keeping accurate records.
Okay. So when you're talking about the transfer process, is that the sale of a residential property?
That's correct.
Okay. So what if the property didn't transfer ownership during that 15 years? Any idea of how many inspections were conducted at a particular property?
I couldn't tell you the exact number. I mean, it does many things besides just the inspections. Like I said, it also allows us to have the database and the information. But I couldn't tell you right now how many times Chris Miller and his staff goes out there, or building staff goes out there to inspect a pier.
Okay. My concern is a fee is for a service.
That's correct.
And if we can't demonstrate we perform the service, then we should probably consider refunding the fee. I had another question, too.
Okay.
Then also, it talks about an exemption that we're going to be eliminating an exemption from the code for non-residential. And it seems as if we're eliminating an exemption, then we would have had to have granted an exemption in the first place. And so when I think, for example, like our recently adopted ban on gas-powered leaf blowers, and the code says, okay, well, if an HOA wants an exemption, here's how you get it, and here's who grants it. So was there ever a criteria for exemptions, a process for exemptions? Can you speak to that?
Is the exemption, are you referring to the current exemption from the payment of rent for
Yes.
residents? My understanding is that came about, again, we based our practice on that of the state, and at the time there was a state public resources code section that didn't allow the State Lands Commission from charging rent for residential piers. The city kind of followed the lead of the state, and we also placed an exemption in our code not to charge rent. But recently the state changed its practice with the adoption of SB 152, and that caused us to kind of look at it as well. And that's what led to the City Council adopting a resolution at the December 11th meeting to finally start charging fair market value rent for residential piers. Again, we weren't required to do so under state law, but we do typically follow the practice of the state.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to raise one question once again. I keep wrestling with this issue of using private docks for commercial leasing. And in one sense, I absolutely have empathy with anyone that is being faced with an increase in their rent or lease for the Tidelands area, as minor as it might be, with the opportunity of recapturing that through the leasing process. But at the same time, I feel that when we created this harbor, those that were involved in that, I can't imagine that at any time they envisioned all docks being able to be commercially leased docks. And that seems to be a very unresolvable condition in my mind. Maybe you need to convince me again.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Gardner.
I wrestled with that during the whole thing, too, back and forth. And I did feel that this afternoon I'd received an email, but several emails, not just the woman who appeared, and bringing up some issues that I really hadn't thought about in terms of the impact. So, yeah, maybe that is, I know we've been through this so long, and the thought of extending it in any sense, but some more discussion of rental, if there's interest on the part of the council, I would certainly I'd participate in that.
Councilman Gardner. Mr. Hinn.
Well, yeah, this is an issue that it's not real clear cut. I agree with that. On the other hand, it's my understanding that we estimate roughly 20% of the residential piers in our harbor have been rented in some fashion or another, more than likely. Would you agree with that estimate?
As an estimate, yes.
Yeah, it's a rough estimate, but nevertheless, if we've got about 1,000 residential piers, and roughly that means 200 of them have been rented over the years on a regular basis. And my district is the peninsula. I've got a lot of residential piers on my district. I've never once received a complaint from anyone about a problem caused by one of those residential piers being rented, although it has not been legal to do so. And unless we pass this item tonight, it will continue to be illegal. I mean, if we don't allow it. And so it seems like it hasn't been a problem. I don't think the passing of this ordinance allowing it will give rise to a large increase in the number of people that will rent them. People, you know, it's not a very large percentage of residential piers that are really even suitable to be rented out, as near as I can tell, because of access issues and privacy issues and people just not wanting to deal with it. And so I'm on balance, I consider it to be in the realm of property rights as well as other things. It is a property that you know, you do own your property, and on balance, I come down on the side of it ought to be allowed for those reasons, and then also now because of the increases in fees that we've got, it does provide an opportunity for people to shelter themselves from that increase in fees. In those instances, and I doubt there are a lot of them, but there may be some where people have a hardship. And so, for those reasons, I think it's appropriate. We have 200 property owners out there who apparently want to do it and want to have the right to do it, and I balance that against virtually no indication of problems from that over the years. And so that's how I came down on it.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Petros.
On this question, it was my understanding from reviewing council's action at that time that the provision for the rental of residential piers came with it the use of the small marina rate then for that. That's not called out in the staff report. Is it still the intent to do that, though?
Councilmember Petros, it's a good question. That was identified in the resolutions that the council adopted in December. This is the follow-up ordinance that, an ordinance being part of the municipal code, we have to change that and take it out of the code to allow it to be rented, and that rental rate defaults to the resolutions adopted in December, which suggested $1.26 a square foot.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
I would just say that I've wrestled with this issue, too. I chatted with a gentleman this afternoon about it, and at the end of the day, I think I come to the same point where Mr. Hinn is. I think it is fundamentally unfair for us to adjust these rents and then not allow people to have full use of their property. And I do see it as a property rights issue. I don't think we're going to have a lot of issues with liveaboards. I don't think we're going to have a lot of issues with access because most docks are accessible. You've got to walk through the fellow's house. It's going to be a pretty close friend that you rent the dock to under those circumstances. And I do believe it provides a modicum of economic return to people for the use of their property. When I was at the conference, Mayor Lee from San Francisco brought in a firm called Airbnb, and it's a young group of people who've created a system where you can rent an air mattress in a house in San Francisco when conventions are there, and he's got 30,000 cities signed up in this thing now of people who rent space in their homes. So that's sort of what's happening in the future. As it relates to boats, the guy with the biggest fee had room on his docks for 13 vessels. And I just think it's not realistic to believe that some of those aren't rented, and we have had rentals for many, many years without any of these attenuant problems, and I don't think it's going to be a problem going forward. Although I do recognize the potential it has for it, and I hope we'll watch this carefully and think about appropriate regulations, whether it's parking or trash or liveaboard rules or that kind of thing, if this were to become a problem. If there's no further questions from the council.
I would just like to follow up and say that I would assume that should we discover 6 months down the road or a year down the road that there are problems, that we could take a corrective action at that point in time.
I think we should.
And then my final question would be, along with that resolution, we talked about just as we have on our business license reporting and these types of things, that there would be a box to check as to whether or not you were going to be commercially leasing your dock, and thereby which rental lease rate that you would fall under. Will we also have an enforcement opportunity and penalty for those that violate that on a report-made basis established within the procedures?
I guess the short answer is yes. We haven't developed that process yet, though. We don't expect to be the rental police, at least initially. We do a lot of things on a complaint basis. That may be the way we do it in this sense.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no further council comments, let me open this up for public comment. If you have any comment on this matter, please step forward.
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. This is the last item I was able to submit written comments on, so I hope you will refer to those. Three of those things I wanted to underscore. The first was that although the effort to insert the proposed $100 appeal fee into the cost recovery table that is in Section 33630 of the Municipal Code is well-intentioned, but it seems completely at odds with the remainder of that brief section and even with the title of this section, which is cost recovery percentages. The whole idea was to set percentages so that the dollar amounts that are specified here would be reflected. Percentages would yield dollar amounts which appear in the separate master fee table that you establish by resolution so that they can be automatically adjusted as costs go up in future years. It seems ironic that you would be falling back here to a fixed dollar amount when much of the motivation for the harbor charge exercise was your belief that past councils had been sticking with outdated fixed dollar amounts and that could not adjust as costs and values went up. The second point is this idea I see in the proposed municipal code revisions that the appeal fee will be refunded if the appeal is successful. Sounds to me like a good idea, but one wonders why that is not being applied to other appeals. And finally, I share Councilwoman Daigle's confusion about the significance of rescinding this $100 inspection fee. Our current city code indicates we are charging that as something necessary for the health, safety, and welfare of our community. And by rescinding it, we seem to be saying that it actually was not necessary or is not necessary in the future. And I share her confusion about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers, please. Please come forward.
Good evening. I'm Bonnie McClellan. I was here this afternoon, but I just thought I would reiterate. I'm talking about the proposed dock tax, and I would like to have the City Council vote to pull the item about the change in dock fees so that we don't have anything about renting out your docks, the private docks. And I would like to see a study done on the solutions to the issues that I think come with renting out private docks. And that would be pollution, because you know that a lot of times people stay overnight and they go potty and they take showers and they wash the dishes, and all that water is going into the bay. And we've just paid to have the pollution taken out of it, so I hate to see that happening again. The trash, I know, is a big problem because we have had people renting out their dock next to us, and there is trash everywhere. Parking is always an issue because everywhere where there are docks, there are people living close together with a 6-foot setback and maybe 3 cars and maybe 4 cars in a 3-car garage, so there's no place for anyone else. There's noise because people that are renting the docks don't know the neighbors and don't care if they're a little bit louder, and they have parties, they have arguments, and they don't realize that the water magnifies this. And next to last, that they bring along extra staff. They have boats that are always needing to be washed. They have to be, the engines need to be fixed. All kinds of things happen. And brings on petty crime because there's a lot of extra people wandering around in the neighborhood, mostly looking for parking places, and then when they find them, they're moseying up the street and down on the docks and can see right into your house. And the privacy of having someone that is not your neighbor, now your new best friend, looking into your back used to be private patio and looking right into your house. So I would like you to consider taking this proposed change and removing the use of private docks for rental fees. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers, please.
Barry McClellan, 1034 West Bay Avenue. Also, I just want to reiterate with what my wife has said. We had a neighbor next door to us who was an absentee. He wasn't there very often. He rented his dock. He had a joint interest in a boat. There were 6 other people that owned the boat. One of them, they arrived there at different periods of time. They had loud parties. I had to call the cops on 4 different occasions. They can't do a thing about it until after 10 o'clock. And I didn't report, Councilman Henn, to you or anyone else sitting up here on those issues. The police department handled it. Now, it's sometimes difficult to explain that. I'm not the only one that's had that kind of problem. We have a 35-foot front lot with 2.5 feet of setback on either side. My dad used to call this area the most expensive ghetto in the United States. The fact of the matter is, people are always walking, if they're renters, always walking up and down the side of the yard on the lessor's side of the fence. That doesn't do very much. We don't have any privacy there anymore. Fortunately, we don't have any renters either currently. But if in fact that changes, and I think that you're going to be encouraging renters by eliminating the ban against them, I just think it's something that needs to be rethought. Mr. Selleck is not here simply because of the fact he's had to recuse himself, but Bonnie spoke with him. He lives in Promontory Bay, which is a non-concerned neighborhood. We used to live there, too, with all of this brouhaha about the dock tax. And he made a statement to her, they have never had or do not currently have renters in Promontory Bay because they have a little boat that goes around there and looks for them. I personally know 2 people who rent boats and live in Promontory Bay, have rented boats since practically day one, and the little boat, they had no idea what it was there for. So these things need to be taken into consideration. You folks have had almost impossible success at picking up the people who are renting slips and get them fined or thrown out or whatever is appropriate, and you haven't been successful. That's why there are 20% of the docks renting. They laugh at you. Now, you've changed the rules. The rules are essentially the same as, except for the fact you're going to pay them a little bribe to pick up the tax revenue when you allow them to rent their docks. I don't think you're going to have one iota of improvement in watching who is renting and who isn't renting. I don't think so. Would you walk up to the city council, to any of these gentlemen over here, and say, oh, golly gosh, I'm renting my slip. Please, please send me a bill?
Thank you, Mr. McClellan. Further speakers, please come forward.
I didn't come here tonight to talk about that, but it's an issue that bothers me. I live down on the peninsula near
State your name, please.
I'm sorry?
State your name, please. State your name, please.
Wayne Zippy.
Thank you, Wayne.
And I want to thank you all for the consideration that you have on the property rights issue. And I agree with what you were saying. I think that's the way it should be. We don't want to become like California. We're Newport. We're unique. We'd like things the way they are. People have a right to the things that they've worked hard for, that they've earned. I don't own a dock, but I certainly support the people that do. And I think we should support them and not create more cumbersome problems on renting the docks or using them for themselves. We don't want to infringe on somebody else's rights. As far as all the problems that were brought up, that's what we have law enforcement for. That's what we have other violations for, codes for. If you have a problem with someone else infringing on your area, making a mess, doing whatever, call the police and enforce those rights, but don't take away the dock owner's rights. They have rights to that property. They pay very high taxes because their property value is high. Support them on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
I'll move the item.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
While council is voting, I'll also read the ordinance title, ordinance number 2013-1, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach, amending Chapter 3.36 and Title 17 of the Newport Beach Municipal Code relating to commercial and non-commercial TIDELANDS leases. With that, with Councilmember Daigle voting no and Councilmember Selledge recusing himself, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Item 12, resolution number 2013-6, prevailing wages. Mr. Kiff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. You did have a fairly long study session item about this afternoon. I won't include a anything but a verbal staff report. This is a request to ask you to consider the adoption of a resolution which would exempt some locally funded public works projects from prevailing wage. The council would have the choice to select which project should be paid at prevailing wage, but the exemption would apply unless otherwise directed by the council. With that, certainly welcome your questions.
Thank you. I know there's some folks in the audience who want to speak. We had extensive public comments during the study session, so I bear in mind that we remember everything you said. So if you have things to say, if you would please be to the point and direct.
Well, we start.
And before we get to public comment, Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, I just think that we've written this from the wrong perspective, from my point of view. This is like, we aren't going to use prevailing wage unless, and I think what we're trying to do is give ourselves a choice, so I don't know why we are trying to put ourselves in a box and make it difficult to pay a prevailing wage. Apparently, the city attorney feels that we should have some language that gives us this, but as I say, I don't know why we just don't say we can go either way or what, but this is very narrowly written, and it's written particularly, seems to me, sort of anti-prevailing wage, and I'm not sure that that's really what we mean to do. That may be only my perspective on it, but I wanted to, as long as it can be public comment, I want that perspective out there.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Daigle.
I do wonder if you've given any thought to alternative language. I think that would more accurately reflect the sort of our actual practices today. Sounds like you have, look like you have.
Well, I think that our practice to date has been to basically include the language when we're going to exclude ourselves from prevailing wages. Like I said earlier, is basically just kind of doing the flip side of that, basically saying we're not going to pay prevailing wage unless the city council, authorizes it or wants it on a particular project. I don't think the intent, though, is to basically change kind of the current practice of from what I've seen is mainly requiring prevailing wage on all the public construction projects, such as like City Hall, and then basically not paying prevailing wage on the things that are defined as public works, but really aren't public works, such as, landscaping contracts and things of that nature. So I don't think overall the intent is to change the overall practice of the city, but the intent is basically to ensure that you don't get caught without including the language in a contract where you wouldn't want to be paying prevailing wage.
Council comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Petros.
Would it achieve Councilmember Gardner's objective if in that section it said the City of Newport Beach may exempt locally funded public works projects? You just inserted may, or does that create
Well, then you're going to be making a
confusion?
determination on each contract. You'd be making a determination on each contract, as opposed to just kind of setting a general rule.
That's what we were...
We
were attempting to avoid doing that in each contract because we were seeing a number of them come up, and we certainly can do that. That would be the status quo.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Mr. Petros.
There were a couple of points being made during the study session that I just wanted to follow up on. The notion that non-prevailing wage practitioners are unlicensed or uninsured, is that necessarily the case, or can we write into our contracts that whomever we choose to deal with, they will be licensed professionals and they would be insured?
Yeah,
we can write the terms of the contract regardless of who we select, correct?
But that's right. Those are standard provisions in all of our contracts, is that we require certain licenses as well as insurance requirements. Those are standard provisions in all of our contracts, and we do verify that they are licensed, and we do verify that they do have the appropriate insurance by having them submit certificates of insurance.
Thank you.
Beyond which, staff always qualifies our contractors, certainly at least the prime contractors, and I'm sure in most cases the major subprime contractors, qualifies them based on their work history and job performance with both the city and with other jurisdictions. I mean, I think we do a pretty darn careful job making sure that we're not hiring a guy with a pickup truck and a monkey wrench to come in and do sophisticated work for the city. We do a good job with that.
But to that regard, though, isn't there state law requirements for public works contracts regarding the need to go to low bid or to take the low bidder?
Well, there are state requirements, but we also have a charter provision which requires us to go with the lowest responsible bidder.
So what happens is we have a discussion about who was responsible or not?
Yeah, well, on every
because
contract.
we have to take the low bidder as long as we deem them qualified.
Yeah, so on each contract, when they're being reviewed, you look at one aspect of it as responsibility and the other is responsiveness before those are brought forward to the City Council.
Let me ask Mr. Batum, this is a prevailing wage job, the City Hall. When we did, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, all of the contractors on this job were pre-qualified as well. So that, we find generally when you pre-qualify, you end up getting firms that are paying prevailing wage and then some, because the better firms typically want to retain their good people. They generally pay a little better. I think what we're talking about here is there are certain projects that are termed as public works projects that aren't necessarily, we don't really view them as an actual capital project. It's more of a landscape maintenance or a building maintenance or that kind of thing. And so you want to have that kind of flexibility because there's a big difference in a lot of those contracts.
And when we did Oasis and the Newport Coast Community Center, the same principle applied. Those are both prevailing wage jobs as well.
Yeah, all our general specs say prevailing wage in them at this point. So even in your concrete, every job we've been doing is prevailing wage in my camp.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Gardner.
I'm not objecting at all to the goal. But what I am objecting to is the language, which it just doesn't seem to say that to me. It seems to say that we aren't going to pay prevailing wage unless we have state money involved, unless a state interest, well, this doesn't serve the state, it just serves the city of Newport Beach, or unless the city council determines, well, are you going to bring every project to us then and say, do you think this is complex enough and we should pay prevailing wage?
Well, we would bring, we bring just about every project to you anyway. What we would do is we'd have a staff recommendation as to what should be paid prevailing wage upon and what would not be. And again, there's a fairly...
Beforehand, you'd have just a list of, maybe a descriptive list of what you think the parameters are, or what?
That's one way to do it, and that could work out well, actually, in our capital improvement project process. When you adopt the CIP, we could make a notation as to which we'd expect to bid with each. What we're trying to do here, and what the city attorney is trying to do, is really protect the rights of charter cities. And your right and the staff's right to recommend something that would not be prevailing wage, and just to keep that flexibility. To me, it's about choice.
No, I agree. I'm all for the choice, and I'm all for what we're trying to accomplish. I just, as I say, the language seems so stringent that I'm getting a little more comfortable if I can see some parameters. I just want to be sure that we're not, bottom feeding all the time.
Let me ask this, to get to Councilmember, if we used Councilmember Gardner's language on May, does that give us the flexibility that we would need, I think, to respond to the Vista case, that we have the option if we wanted to do it? Because I can see if we're doing a restroom rebuild, or we're doing a project like that, as a practical matter, any of the highway projects that we do come with federal or state or Measure M funds that carry with them a requirement. Any grant funds that we get carry with them a requirement. And it seems that our practice has been, if we're going to do a major project such as this, or a community center or a library, that we would require it as a matter of choice. So can we use Councilmember Gardner's language to get to a point that gives us that flexibility, but does it in a way that really recognizes the reality of what we do?
Well, perhaps maybe, I'm not sure exactly where she wanted to insert the language, but perhaps if we read...
Actually, that was Mr. Petros that suggested that.
Oh, but perhaps if we put the payment of prevailing wages separately authorized by the City Council and just ended the third point there without all the additional language, I think that maybe that achieves the goal. So it's not so restrictive.
That would be better, certainly.
Well, why don't
just for everyone's notes, that's in section 1. It's the last. There's points 1, 2, and 3, and what the attorney is suggesting is ending that after the phrase "City Council."
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Selich.
Yeah, I thought we were going to take public input before we started weighing in on this, but I'm comfortable with the way that it's written. And I think it gives us the most flexibility in what we're doing. And like the staff said, it protects the charter cities. And so I'm comfortable with it the way that it is, rather than messing with the language.
Okay. Well, someone can offer a motion, or we could take public comment and then offer a motion.
I'm just fine with taking public comment.
Okay, let's take some public comment. Anyone who would like to speak on this matter, please come forward. And if you've spoken before, we remember who you are and what you said. So,
yes.
But you said you had some new information, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. Again, Samantha Draper with Smart Cities Prevail. I do want to reiterate that absolutely as a charter city you have the right, there's no question, the Supreme Court has told you you have the right to exempt prevailing wage. Charter cities have a lot of options, policy options, available to them that may not be good policy options. A whole host that general law cities don't enjoy. The question is this the best policy for the city? I don't think there's anyone in their right mind that's going to question whether as a charter city you have the authority or not to do this. And then I just wanted to quickly kind of caution you on a piecemeal process towards the prevailing wage policy. As you saw some of your local contractors speaking earlier, they contribute enormously to the local economy. And what will happen, it's sort of cautionary, I've seen it in other cities, is when you do a piecemeal process, you introduce a lot of insecurity and uncertainty to the local contractors and to the local workers. And as you know, in an economy, the last thing you want is uncertainty and insecurity in your economy. So I think by preserving and choosing a prevailing wage policy, you're going to send a very strong message to your local contractors and your local workers that you value their economic contributions to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers, please. Please come forward.
I'm not going to bore you with another long speech. I just wanted to briefly, as I promised the mayor and council members, thank you again for letting me come up. As a retired fire marshal and the representative of the 56 fire sprinkler contractors, one of which actually installed the sprinklers that are protecting us tonight, it's Underwriters Fire Protection, was a prevailing wage employer. But I just ask that you carefully consider this. The quality that went into this project was under a prevailing wage. And just to look around this beautiful council chamber, I think it's pretty clear. So again, representing 56 contractors as a director of the Fire Sprinkler Advisory Board of Southern California and a retired fire official, I just ask that you consider it carefully tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Newport Beach City Council members, staff, City Manager, and City Attorney. My name is Jim Adams. I'm a council representative for the Los Angeles and Orange County Building and Construction Trade Council. Additionally, I'm a 50-year resident of Orange County, currently residing in the 400 block of South Camellia Street in Anaheim. Our council represents affiliated construction unions whose membership exceeds 140,000 skilled craftsmen and women in Los Angeles and Orange County in the construction industry. We're here today to quite simply encourage you to continue the prevailing wage requirement for your locally funded projects. We believe that a city such as Newport Beach, and I've heard the word mentioned unique, prosperous, top-notch, cut above, all those terms describe Newport Beach. We believe that Newport Beach deserves only the best, highest quality contractors. Contractors that compete based on skill, on safety, and efficiency rather than by cutting wages. Contractors that hire the necessary skilled craft workers needed for successful completion. Prevailing wage, as you've heard many times today, promotes the use of local contractors, workforce, where cheap labor comes in from elsewhere. If you take the time to review the studies, you will find that there's no real savings in not requiring prevailing wage. There are those that will argue and stand here and tell you there are 10, 20, and 30% savings. It's pretty hard to justify that when the cost of labor is only 21.2% of the total job cost. If you talk about apprenticeship, each one of these construction crafts have a jointly administered labor management state-approved apprenticeship program. These programs are funded mainly by negotiated employer contributions. The education that these workers receive in the classroom and on the job translates into a skilled worker earning a decent wage, medical insurance, and pension benefits. These folks are not on welfare, costing you and I, the taxpayer. We're aware that there's very few projects that are only locally funded. We don't believe that it's worthwhile if there was a difference. We don't understand. We don't think that there was those few projects. If you're talking about grass and trees, we're good with that. We're concerned about construction projects. And we believe, as I stated before, that this city deserves more.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, good evening. Cindy McMacken, mother of 5, Newport Beach resident, and happen to be a owner of a large contracting company. I'll try not to repeat myself on anything I said this afternoon, but there was a point I was trying to make at the end that I think bears repeating, and that is that I think Newport Beach, I've lived all over the country. I've lived in Newport Beach for 17 years. This is the best city on the West Coast. It's by far, and I trust that you guys know what you're doing. But I don't understand a situation where you'd like to get into, where you have to opt into a situation to get your best skilled, best laborers. In my 17 years of experience in construction, the best scenario happens when you have a prevailing wage payers on the job, where you get the best trained, the best skilled workers that do things right the first time. It allows you to have a cost savings, faster completion, higher safety, and higher quality standards. So I understand that you guys have the right, and Newport Beach should have the ability to do what you want, but I don't understand adopting a resolution where you have to get back together to opt into a situation to get to these skilled workers, as opposed to maybe in situations where you're allowed to opt out. That's the only thing that I think, that don't adopt the resolution to stop prevailing wage, but keep prevailing wage and allow you to opt out when you need to. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Evening again, Doug Mangione, and again, we read comments at study session for National Electrical Contractors Association, and just a couple of comments on construction workers. You folks have to remember, we are part-time workers. We don't get paid vacations. We typically don't get holidays, sick days, or anything else. So we only get paid when we're on the job. So sometimes when you look at prevailing wage and you think, boy, that's a lot of money, you've got to remember most construction workers consider about a 8-month year a good year. So please keep that in mind. The other thing is the apprenticeships. Our contractors contribute hourly into apprenticeship programs, jointly administered apprenticeship programs. I was trained 35 years ago at an apprenticeship program in Orange County, and I had a pretty darn good career as an electrician. I raised my family in Orange County. We had health benefits. My children were able to go to doctors and dentists, and boy, I consider myself privileged having had that. So just keep that in mind when you think of construction jobs, that you're talking about part-time workers, you're talking about folks that work hard, and you're talking about workers that, through the apprenticeships, get the ability to earn a good living for themselves, their families, and be good citizens in Orange County. Thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers?
W.R. Dilding, local resident. Acquired property here in 1965, took out my first electrical city license in 1966, mere $25. Just found it the other day. This last speaker talking about vacations, that type of thing. I've been a union contractor. I never belonged to a union. Asked one time for my union card and darn near got knocked on my rear end because I pulled out my Union Oil credit card. But the thing that I've always appreciated, when I didn't have work for men, I could send them back to the hiring hall, the union hall. Kept my unemployment down because somebody else could use them. The other thing was my contributions to, like, the city provides health insurance, retirement, vacation came out of their hourly wage. But it was like in school, you go from one school to another, your transcript goes along with you. I spent, I hate to say it, 4 years non-union. I went downhill. I didn't know what an electrician was. And the gripe guys would leave me because I wouldn't provide benefits. Well, you did to your other employees. Well, go join the union. I would hate to see you. I spent 29 years on a commission in Sacramento dealing with public works. Many of these people, I've heard their names before that spoke tonight. I watched it on TV. And some of the horror stories I have heard in reference to non-union and other cities. Your League of California Cities has 2 representatives on this commission. I highly encourage you to vote this thing down. We can afford it in Newport Beach on those projects that are new construction. There's definitions in the contractor state license law. There is so much. We're taking, I don't know how many sections out of the labor code if you're doing away with prevailing wages. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other speakers, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, and all the attendees here today. We've heard from a lot of folks that are going to be negatively impacted by the potential elimination of prevailing wages. I was kind of waiting to hear who...
State your name, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Jim Conway. I'm with the statewide Labor Management Coalition based in Sacramento. Sorry about that. But we haven't heard from anybody who maybe would voluntarily take a 50% cut in pay for in order to have the opportunity to do their work here for the city. And you have heard both in the study session and in the testimony here tonight, elimination of prevailing wage will have devastating impacts on contractors in this area and workers in this area. And as it's even noted in the City Council staff report, it's difficult to determine an exact dollar amount that's going to be saved under this change because the truth of the matter is there really is no way of knowing that. And in fact, we could provide a dozen peer-reviewed academic studies that stand behind the proposition, as we stated before, prevailing wages carry no significant impact into the overall cost of these projects. In fact, when you consider the potential for rework and projects done incorrectly, it's better to have them done right the first time, as you probably are aware, and hopefully you've seen in your own buildings here in this city. It wouldn't seem to make sense if an architect came to you and said, we could shave a few bucks off by going with aluminum beams instead of steel beams, or we could use plastic instead of glass, or we could use other cost-cutting measures. Now, I'm not using the term bottom feeder. Somebody else used that term earlier. But what you're doing is encouraging people to cut corners. If you're cutting prevailing wages, if you're cutting the floor out from under these workers and these contractors, and you have to come to grips with that. If that's your decision, and as it was described here, a policy decision, it's a decision that you'll have to live with going forward. And we think it's a bad policy decision, and we would like you to reconsider and vote this resolution down. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the City Council. Councilmember Gardner.
Ask the City Attorney, is there some reason why we chose to opt in instead of opt out in terms of what we're trying to protect and what we're trying to achieve?
Well, we're opt-in right now, so if we don't take any action, basically, then prevailing wage applies to, every agreement that we do, unless we make a specific finding that we're not going to pay prevailing wage on a specific job. So that's kind of where we are today. But prevailing wage, I understand everything that they're saying here today. The prevailing wage, according to the labor code, the definitions, it applies to all the maintenance and repair contracts and landscaping. There's a whole host of things that you wouldn't think of as being public works that basically the labor code and the state have defined as being, technically public works under the code, which they apply prevailing wage to. So under the VISTA decision, we think it's, I guess it's our recommendation from the City Attorney's Office that we affirmatively adopt, saying that prevailing wage doesn't apply to the city unless you basically opt in as opposed to the current circumstances.
But the intention, I guess I'm always concerned, not always, in this case, concerned that we have an intention, but the language isn't quite reflective of that, and so we just have to go on good faith that that's what we intend to do, that we don't intend to build buildings outside the prevailing wage, probably, because we want that expertise and that sort of thing, but we want to understand the flexibility for a landscape job or something, which is very different. And seeing that, then I would say that the language we have here, even though I'm not happy with it, is better than what was suggested, because it's actually, if we just say, if we stopped after the payment of the prevailing wage is separately authorized by City Council, then we really have opened up the pool to anything. Whereas if we say, at least here we're saying, anything that has a certain level of complexity is probably going to be under prevailing wage, because that's what we're going to find. So I think there is some more protection that way. So rather than change the language, I guess I would have to go with what we have.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Hannon.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with the language the way it is. Prevailing wage is an anachronism of the construction industry. Construction employment in the United States accounts for 7-8%, I'm not sure, it's been a while since I've looked, of jobs in this country. It's one industry. As far as I know, it's the only industry in this country that has prevailing wage as an aspect of it. We have 93% of the economy of this country that gets along quite well without a prevailing wage concept applied to it. In many industries of high complexity, high risk to the general public as well as to individuals. I'm sorry, it's an anachronism. Our requirement here in this city is to hire highly qualified people to do our work. I don't believe it's necessary to slap a label on them. I want to have the flexibility to hire highly qualified people at whatever the cost is. That's up to staff to determine, to get the best qualified people for a good price. That's what they're supposed to do. And I'm very happy to have an opt-in or an opt-out, whatever it is. I'm happy with the language that we have here, which provides a preference for non-prevailing wage unless there's a good reason to do so. I'm very happy with that. I don't even understand the real underlying concept of it, frankly. It's something that's unique to the construction industry, and I'm just real happy with the way it is.
Councilmember Daigle.
Yes, I'm very comfortable that our building was built by individuals that get prevailing wage. I think they did a terrific job, and they're part of our country, so I have a lot of respect for the trades. The issue that I see here is really what's coming from the city manager, and while I'll be supporting it, and that is, as charter cities, we have to fortify ourselves. And so what our legal staff, our city manager, is advising us is that this is a measure that provides us with an additional level of protection.
Thank you. I guess I would just opine, I see a consensus developing on this language that, this is one of these that becomes a proxy fight for other issues. The practical fact of the matter is that we've used prevailing wage contractors, or contractors who pay prevailing wage, I think is a better way to put it, for all of our major and complicated city projects, and probably will in the future. There are some projects where we probably have some greater flexibility, smaller projects, restrooms, park maintenance, landscaping, that kind of thing, where we do need the flexibility. The law probably is better that we give ourselves the flexibility, and this is probably at the end of the day going to be much ado about practically nothing in terms of its impact. But I think that's where we are. So is there a motion?
I'll move the item.
Is there a
I'll second it.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Okay, thank you all.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to item 13, Balboa Village Residential and Commercial Parking Program.
Quick staff change down here.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that Councilmember Henn gave some preamble remarks earlier in his committee reports about the work of the Balboa Village Advisory Committee. Deputy Director Brenda Wineski is going to provide you with an overview of the proposed Balboa Village parking program.
Good evening. Tonight I wanted to provide you an update on our progress in implementing the Balboa Village Master Plan and get some direction from you on the course that we have outlined with the BVAC's input. As you recall, the Balboa Village Master Plan was adopted by the City Council in September of 2012, and as part of that direction, we developed the Balboa Village Advisory Committee. That committee has met twice to date, focusing on the parking strategies that were contained in the master plan itself. So tonight I wanted to go over with you the work plan that has been developed to implement those strategies, as well as the residential permit parking survey that was conducted in October. The council directed staff to conduct a survey to gauge the support of the residents that were located within the proposed parking district. As you may recall, this is a parking program that is located in the residential area between 7th Street and Adams. The idea being that this neighborhood is being impacted by overflow commercial parking. So an overnight permit parking program would address that concern. So the parking survey was implemented in October. You have a copy of the survey at the dais to show you the what questions were asked. But basically, the survey was mailed to residents within the area, property owners, both residing in the district as well as owners that are absentee owners, as well as tenants of that area. And
Who created the survey?
The survey was actually developed by staff, but it was circulated to the Neighborhood Revitalization Committee, and it was included in the council packet that was reviewed.
Do we have a sample of the questions?
The survey is before you.
Okay, thank you.
So about 1,200 surveys were mailed, and we had about 36% response rate, which we consider to be pretty good in the world of survey work. And as a result, 68.3% of the respondents indicated support for the program, and 31.7% did not support the program. So based upon that response rate, we felt that there was support within the district that we were moving forward. So we presented a work program to the Balboa Village Advisory Committee in December, outlining how we might develop the permit program itself. And the first step would be to develop field work. We recognize that in order for the permit program to be developed, the city's municipal code requires that we demonstrate that there, one, is an issue in the area, and that whatever program we create is not going to be impacting surrounding neighborhoods. And more importantly, we recognize the Coastal Commission will be looking for extensive documentation to not only show who the users are of the area that are creating this potential issue, but that as a result of the program we implement, we will not be impacting coastal access, which is their primary objective. So we anticipate needing to conduct field surveys in spring as well as summer of 2013, and that information will be quite extensive. In your packet, we've proposed to bring on a consultant to help us with that field work. And the next step was public outreach. Although we have conducted outreach when we had the Citizen Advisory Panel develop the master plan, we foresee the need to continue our outreach and to ensure that the residents and the other stakeholders are aware of the progress we're making in developing the program. Another example is you received a correspondence from a mooring leasee. And the mooring owners luckily have become aware of the program, and they have stepped forward indicating they want to be involved and express their comments. So the BVAC has directed staff to actually circulate a survey to the mooring owners so that we can get their input on the survey, understand who they are and what their needs might be, so the BVAC can consider their issues in developing the program as we move forward. The next step would be to reaffirm the project components. When the master plan was developed, it was very much conceived as more of a concept stage. There are certain dynamics that have been outlined as part of the program, but we envision that based upon the field survey as well as additional outreach that we hear, that the BVAC will be reaffirming the program components summertime. And the next step would be to bring the draft ordinance and conduct the required environmental analysis and present that to the council in the fall, with the idea that we would then follow with the Coastal Commission's review in the spring and hopefully implementation in the summer of 2014. So it's in the early stages, but the BVAC feels that we are in the right direction, and this work program is what they have forwarded to the council for consideration and for your confirmation that we're in the right direction. I wanted to go on to the commercial strategies for parking. Before I do so, do you have any questions related to the residential permit parking?
I do. Where does the 4 p.m. come from? Boy, that seems like awfully early.
That was a proposal that was developed by the Citizen Advisory Panel when we developed the master plan.
And nobody thought that the businesses would have a problem with that or anything? I mean, one of the issues we have is I have two areas in my district that have been asking for parking permits, residential parking permits. And so every time we do this, we're opening a door to more demands. We said, no, we need to think. Theirs was like from 11 p.m. And that was considered, well, we don't think we can do that. And now we're saying, oh, hey, from 4 p.m. on, nobody but, unless you live there, can park there. That seems really, really stringent to me. I don't understand where that's, what's the justification?
The time frame,
aside from the fact that the committee said they wanted it.
Yeah, I feel that the field work will be important in modifying that time frame, because it will show, because most importantly is that we need to ensure we're not affecting the beach users, the visitors that we have. And that is what will be important from the field work that will show basically what users are utilizing the parking in that area, and is there available parking for them to utilize if we do have to relocate them. So I see that time frame as being somewhat just something that was proposed, but it will be modified if needed.
And then I know one of the arguments of why this particular area needs preferential parking is because some of the houses are old and don't have garages. Do we know what percentage that is? I mean, are we talking 3? Are we talking 100?
I don't have a figure for that.
Well, it seems to me that's an important figure if that's what we're basing a big part of our rationale on. This is why it's different than some of the other districts. I mean, we certainly have commercial impacts in other districts. We have beach traffic impacting other districts. But this district, and I'm not arguing saying this shouldn't be necessarily, but the whole thing that I understood was this district, we don't have a lot of parking. A lot of these houses don't have garages. Well, how many? I think that's something we should find out.
Yes, I think that would be part of the documentation for as part of the field work, and a very precise count of the number of dwelling units that do not have on-site parking, and we can also, I think, depict that graphically, because I think that's important as well.
Brenda, this, my understanding is that the current, any existing residential parking programs have a fee of $10, and it's $10 for the first, second, however many. This starts at 20 and can go to 100. What's the rationale behind that?
That again was a dollar amount that was proposed by the CAP, and something that will be reassessed as we move forward.
Would we want to make it easier for folks to get these who live in the area?
I think the idea was that it was not priced at a point that would be an issue for residents. Be cost prohibitive.
I'd like to see it come down if there's rationale for that, to make it as easy as possible for folks to get these.
Any other questions on the residential program before I move forward?
Well, these recommendations came from the Citizen Advisory Group that was involved with it. And we do have, while there are other parts of the city that are impacted by beach parking and commercial parking, this area is relatively unique by the intensity of impact, especially as it relates to, for example, the Catalina Flyer, where people will come and park for 72 hours while they go to Catalina for the weekend, or on a overnight, or on a fishing boat excursion, or whatever it might be. And this whole area is heavily impacted all the time, every summer, by long-term beach parking in the entire area. And so I see, for that reason, I see unique characteristics here. Furthermore, we're talking about a revitalization effort for the village that we hope will come to fruition, that I'm hoping will include the Balboa Theater renovation as well as the Exploration initiative that could further intensify the issue. And so the idea here is to set this up so that as that further intensification occurs, there will be a buffer area that will help the citizens in the area deal with that more successfully than they have in the past. So I think it's important to note that what we're talking about here is nothing more than an initial proposed program. This is going to have to get mashed around a lot. It'll certainly get mashed around when it gets to Coastal Commission. And Council is certainly, welcome to make changes in the program before it goes to Coastal. I understand that. I think taken as a whole, it's a reasonable proposal for a starting point here, as did the citizen panel that crafted it to start with.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle and in the future, that Balboa Island around Agate has the same problems with the Catalina Flyer and the sports fishers, same types of complaints from the folks that live over there.
Thank you. Do you want to continue?
Yes, thank you. Another component of the master plan parking effort is focusing on the commercial parts of it. And what is proposed is to create a parking benefit and shared parking district. And the idea being that we would create a pool of parking so that it provides greater flexibility to the commercial businesses in that area. Specifically, some of the strategies that we'll be looking at are to look at the parking meter rates to ensure that they're more of a demand-based rate, to ensure that when the parking closest to the prime areas, they're paying a higher rate than if they're staying for a longer term, they're parking in a distance location. Secondly, is to look at the parking requirements themselves. Currently, our standards don't reflect the fact that we're dealing with a pedestrian area, so there could be some greater flexibility there, lowering the standards to incentivize revitalization and reuse of some of the properties. Thirdly is an employee parking program. Right now we have some employees that may arrive early in the morning and taking up the prime spots. Well, we might want to create a program to allow them to park in more of a remote location to free up those spots for greater turnover. Number 4 is to suspend the in-lieu parking fee program for the Balboa area. Currently, about $13,000 is collected annually, but the idea is that that parking program, the in-lieu fee, is in contrast to the parking management program itself. So we see that we could eliminate or suspend that fee for those current fee payers. And lastly, as I mentioned, is to establish the parking benefit and shared district itself. The idea is that you would create the boundaries for the shared parking situation, but also create a governance structure to allow for the benefits that are being created within that district to perhaps be looked at differently. So again, that's something that needs to be ferreted out and more extensively with the BVAC. I have a schedule here that is very complicated on screen here, but the point is that we've broken down the strategies in 2 pieces. One would be bringing to the council the parking meter restructuring and the employee parking program and suspension of the in-lieu parking fee in May. So we'll see some immediate progress there. And then the larger projects, meaning the parking standards, the parking benefit district, and the residential permit parking program coming back to council in the fall. So we'll be busy with the BVAC. As you see in this table, we are directed to have action items on each monthly meetings, and we've been successful in 2 meetings so far, so we hope to continue that throughout the rest of the year. So, and also part of the structure is to ensure we have 2 workshops. We want to have a business and property owner workshop in the spring so we can let the stakeholders understand what direction we're going in, and then circle back with them in the fall to let them know what we are ending up with and proposing to the council. But that is the commercial parking.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Councilmember Garter?
I was just thinking of what Councilman Selich said, and if this program goes through, then Balboa Island hasn't even begun to experience the impact that it will have. And perhaps be thinking of it along a parallel path, because I wonder if we go to the Coastal Commission and we get okay on this, and then next year you go with the Balboa Island because they have nothing but Catalina fire parking, it might be harder. Would it be easier to go all at one time and get both of them?
Comments? Any other comments by the council?
Just one further comment. What we're really talking about here is a straw man. It's a construct here that will be subject to further research and analysis. Really, the first Coastal Commission is really the last hurdle. The first hurdle is to develop the data in support of what the right decisions ought to be. And so there's going to be, we'll have the consultants in, we'll do the parking studies, and it may well be, as a result of the data that we get, that this ought to be modified further before it goes to Coastal, because the data tells us it should. So what we're really talking about here is a straw man that can serve as a platform for further analysis and then a finalized recommendation. So that's why I'm not too concerned about tinkering with the individual elements of this until we get smarter about it.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mayor, I'm a little confused over interpreting the results of the survey that have been obtained thus far. I would assume that your yeses are a combination of, in the survey, question number 1 and number 3. 1, an absolute yes, and number 3, I would support it with the following kinds of conditions, because you only provide a yes category and a no category. If I then go down and look at the interpretation of the statements, it seems that everyone centers around no opinion. And they're all, if 3 is no opinion, then overnight impacts my block is a 2.5. Proposed area is too large is a 3.4. Price schedule is appropriate is 3. I mean, everyone, so I guess my point is that this is not going to be an easy task, because I'm not sure that there's any consensus of direction on this whatsoever from the questionnaire.
Can agree with that.
Yeah, you have 68% of 38%, which comes out to about 20%. So, yeah. it's surprising that it wasn't more overwhelming in favor of it.
Well, a 38% or 36% response rate, it's pretty darn good to a survey. So I took that as a pretty valid survey. Any statistician will tell you that that's a very high response rate on which to base pattern analysis.
I totally agree with that. I'm saying that when I look at the results, I don't see a high turnout.
68% of the respondents in favor of a residential parking permit program, and some portion of those respondents had a thought about how it might have been a little differently structured. It's the 68% that said they wanted the RPP that I think we need to be focused on here.
All right, are there other council comments before we open this up for public comment? All right, let me invite the public, anyone that has a comment on this, to come forward, please. State your name, 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Mary Ann Zippy, and I live in the parking permit area that we're discussing. Many of you have already brought up some of the things that I'm going to be remarking on here. To begin with, I appreciate the effort that went into the program, but I think basing resident approval on a half-page survey residents only had 2 weeks to respond to is problematic, and I have some items for your consideration. One, I currently do not pay to park in front of my home. To my knowledge, no resident in Newport does. This parking permit program will force me to pay a fee, I call it a tax, of up to $200 a year to pay for what I now get for free. Two, there's no restriction on how often or how much these parking taxes will be raised. In fact, according to the final report of the Balboa Village Parking Management Plan, the fee taxes mentioned in the survey are only initial estimates, and the city may wish to price permits to cover the full cost of program administration. Administration requires administrators and thus more salaries. My years of experience have shown that once a government gets its hands in your pockets, it constantly grows a bigger fist. Councilman Henn has even stated that the parking should be priced as premium parking. Number three, according to the management plan report, the permit does not guarantee you a place to park. So you might be paying for something you now get for free that you won't be able to use. Four, the city claims the reason for beginning the program is to help out residents with non-residents who take up parking places. However, according to the management plan, the city has a potential to make over $250,000 on this program yearly. A major motive is clearly revenue. Five, the entire peninsula is impacted by non-residents taking up parking places, yet only our 7-block area on the peninsula must pay these new fee taxes. Why aren't the rest of the peninsula, Balboa Island and Corona del Mar, being forced into this program? We already pay high taxes to live here, yet most other neighborhoods in Newport Beach do not have the additional expenses that we do. Those of us who live in this district are already dealing with the costs associated with thousands of visitors descending on our neighborhood most of the year. We do not need the city to charge us an outrageous $200 for parking rights that the rest of the city has for free. Rather than taxes applied fairly, that is taxing authority abuse. It's hard enough to plan family gatherings and juggle parking when you live in an area that attracts so many visitors. But to complicate that situation for residents by not allowing parking on the streets after 4 p.m. in the evening without a permit discriminates not only against residents but also their families and friends. Six, most important, none of this information was included in the survey. If it had been, it most certainly would have changed the results or increased the participation. The city survey results show only the yes and no votes, as was pointed out. It does not even acknowledge the third option offered residents, which is a parking permit proposal with changes. And only 10% of resident owners responded to the survey. 90% of respondents were renters or absentee owners. Therefore, I believe the city's contention that the survey has been accepted and approved by the public is inaccurate. At the very least, the survey should be rewritten and resubmitted to the residents with accurate and complete information about the program, plenty of notice in the newspapers, websites, and other media to warn residents that it's coming, notice that their input is essential, and plenty of time given for them to complete it.
Thank you, Ms. Zippy.
All right. I have just another paragraph for a conclusion. We're not a commercial area. We are a residential area. And according to the Coastal Commission, approval depends on clearly defining and proving that there's a problem. I don't think we have a parking problem. Residents are able to find parking places, but I do think this is an attempt to raise revenue.
Thank you. Next, please.
Dan Wesley. I'm a mooring permit owner, and I've been in the harbor for about 23 years. And at this point, I just really want to just thank staff for involving us. We came to one of the meetings and expressed our opinion about the fact that we're not being involved in the parking permit program, and we felt that the boaters in the C section should be. Just a couple points that I had written about. The mooring, the people that are on the moorings are part of the harbor. They're part of the culture of the harbor. And to think that, I just don't want anyone to think that, we're just part of the overflow. We're not. Our fees were increased last year, and I have to agree, I call it a tax. And for those taxes, we become part of the community, and so we should be a part of the parking permit program also. And there's only going to be a small number of boaters, I'm sure, that are going to be involved in it, so it's not going to be a big impact on the program. But thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, please.
Don Beatty, Balboa resident since 1938, and I also I'm a Section C mooring permit. I have stated several times that I do favor a parking permit program and would like to see it tried. However, just a couple of things. I think it extends too far west, and to include Bay Island, which has their own parking structure, as you're well aware, is borders on the ludicrous. And the other thing is I am glad that Councilmember Hill has recognized the final chart in that survey as being inconclusive. This is the whole parking thing. There is a problem there, and but it's going to be a tough nut to crack. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Come on down. Don't wait. If you want to come down and get in position while this person's speaking, that might be helpful. State your name, please.
City Council, Mayor. My name is Howard Hall. I'm a longtime Balboa resident and property owner. Been down here since 1945. I have come here again tonight to ask that the proposed residential parking permit district not be passed with the current stated boundaries. They were never part of the original proposal and should not be part of the final proposal. Extending the parking district 10 blocks beyond Adams Street is a completely arbitrary decision. It makes no more sense to have the ending boundary at 7th Street than it would be to have it at 10th Street or to have it at 15th Street. Overnight residential parking this far from the downtown area is not affected by visitors going to the bars, restaurants, or the Nautical Museum, or for that matter, the Catalina Flyer. If anyone has ever come down to take a look at the cars parked on Balboa Boulevard, where I live, for example, they would clearly see that night after night, the same vehicles belonging to residents are in place. We do not need a residential parking permit system that extends beyond, say, Medina Way, where residents most certainly are affected by visitor parking. We do not want an overly large residential parking permit system that extends to 7th Street. The Central Newport Beach Community Association has not favored such a parking permit system either. A number of my neighbors have also contacted council and committee members in the past expressing a similar viewpoint. We ask that you please listen to your constituents and amend the proposed boundaries to the residential parking permit program. Thank you very much, and I have extra copies.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other speakers?
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I just wanted to comment on the parking survey showing this groundswell of demand for a residential parking permit program. The results were presented a little bit differently on the slides we saw, but those of you who read the staff report in advance would have seen on page 2 and again on page 12 the claim that 68% of the people surveyed supported the program as proposed, and another 35% would support it with some changes. If you add those two numbers together, you get 103% in favor, which is a result you might expect if you polled the population of Albania on how they favored a new government program to pay for something that used to be free. As Councilman Hill noted, 68% is really the fraction who would accept the program as proposed or with some changes, but we have no idea what changes they want, or at least very little idea of that. And I think despite Councilman Henn's confidence in the survey, one does have to appreciate that there's 2/3 of the people who were sent cards that did not return them at all. So we have no idea how they feel about this program or why. I am not an expert on surveys, but I would think there would be some obligation to do a random sampling of those people who did not respond to find out what their attitude is. It might be the same or the others, or it might be quite different. I would guess that some of them probably are so disenchanted with the governmental process that they think this is just another program that their say is not going to have any effect on, and they're just going to be steamrolled over with this new program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosier. Any other speakers? Please state your name.
My name is Jim Stratton. I'm a resident in Peninsula, on the Peninsula. I've been involved, along with other interested citizens, with the overnight residential parking permit program since the fall of 2010. I was on the Balboa Village Citizens Advisory Panel that recommended the permit program, and it's very frustrating to sit in the audience and have answers from Ms. Gardner and not be able to give them. And I will respond to you at your email address about those questions.
You shouldn't do it tonight, so that since we're going to vote, it'll be too late later.
Well, in answer to your question about garages, our group actually did a count of all of the garages within the area proposed, Adams to 7th, and there are 1,019 usable parking spaces off-street. There are 716 on-street parking spaces for a total of 1,734 parking spaces. There are 853 residences in the designated area. Now, if you use the normal rule of thumb of 2 parking spaces per residence, you end up with about 1,700 parking spaces. So, or parking spaces required. So what you end up really is about 28 available parking spaces if 2 cars were parked in every residence. Now, I live on a street that has 2 families with 4 cars. and both of them have non-usable garages. They're legal non-conforming. So all of those cars in that family, 4 cars each, park on our street. It's a problem for residences. So, and in answer to your question about 4 o'clock, the reason that 4 o'clock was chosen is we knew that we would probably have to adjust that back as it went to coastal. They probably would not approve that. It would be nice to have that to allow people who are coming home from residences or coming home from work to be able to find a place to park at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when they get home. So that was the thinking or the reasoning behind the 4 o'clock. We'd be happy with 10 o'clock. We'd be happy with 8 o'clock. We'd be happy with 11 o'clock. I know I've gone over my time, but I'm answering.
Yeah, but he should have some more time because I did ask him to respond.
I am now currently on the Balboa Village Advisory Committee, and we've spent many hours studying this. As I said, we started in 2010 studying this. There have been 6 reports, studies that have been done in the past since 1995, all of which, these are some done by the city, some done by professional consultants, all of which have recommended some kind of permit parking or preferential parking for that area west of the Balboa Village. And I have to commend the council for finally moving forward, at least testing the waters toward a parking program. We've looked at the local ordinances, gotten input from close to 400 residents. We have actually walked the streets and talked to people and gotten signatures in the affected area. If the public would like further facts about the proposed overnight parking permit program and its progress, rather than hearing rumor, innuendo, and half-truths, which some of you may have heard, I would be glad to be of assistance. I'll be at the next Balboa Village Advisory Committee meeting, Wednesday, February 13th, at 4 p.m. We meet at the Exploration Nautical Museum in Balboa, and at that time, we can talk about email addresses where I can give you some more information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize these consultant studies, including the last 2 that were commissioned by the city, Nelson Nygaard and Walker Parking, both recommended on their own this idea of a residential parking permit for this area.
Any other speakers?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm really excited tonight because it's been 7 years since I graduated UCI, and my major was social science with a specialization in research and analytical methods. Basically, I wrote surveys. So I can tell my mom tonight that we can knock this off my bucket list, and I was able to use my bachelor's degree. So thank you very much for the opportunity tonight. What I would say, if I got, and I'm a resident of Balboa Island, so I'd hate to see some of the spillover down towards us, because we definitely do see quite a bit of traffic from the flyer activity. But if I receive this in the mail, it's a pretty confusing survey. So what I would say just off of the bat is, I don't really know how valid the data can be taken. If you look just at, at 1, 2, and 3, I would imagine people, when they went down the line, they clicked 1 box or 2 box. Well, if they did that, if they clicked either one of the first or second box, they're not supposed to click off any of the other boxes, which is kind of can skew the data there. And if you go down below, it's just there's a lot of questions that really maybe would be better suited for yes/no type questions, and then digging down from there to see what sort of action the residents would want. So I would recommend doing this sort of survey in kind of a 2-pronged effort to get a general idea and maybe dissect the sample a little bit more, because you have such a variety of the type of residents down there, whether they be, homeowners, live-in homeowners, renters, or absentee owners, and then move from there. So, thank you. This is a great opportunity. I'm glad. Mom's proud.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
While Bill is coming down, I will also tell you that we did look at a color-coded chart of all of the responses, and there was no significant difference in response as relates to resident owners, non-resident owners, and renters. And there was no significant pattern geographically in the responses. So we did try to make a concerted effort to determine whether these survey results appeared to be reasonable and valid.
W.R. Dilding, I'm here tonight to thank this council, the previous council, staff, for their efforts on this. My first awareness of preferred residential parking came in a newsletter from my community association back April 28th, 1997. It's been passed over and over. How many consultants? 5, 6? I even had one report that they didn't have, had to loan it to, make a copy. It's a tough one. Then your economic development group came out with a implementation plan of the Walker report, and they had parking meters in front of all residents, or all parcels from A Street to Coronado. Residents on Fernando, Coronado got very upset. I got upset, got behind this, and been involved in it since. Please, let's bring this thing. This is brought up so many times. People, well, they talk about this and they do this and nothing ever happens. This is the closest we've ever come to taking the next step. Thank you. If I may answer a question to Councilman Member Gardner. Right next door to me, on a 60-foot wide by 80-foot lot, 11 units, no parking. Right behind it is a 30 by 80-foot lot, 3 units, no parking. One lot down, there is 6 units. Property line to property line, front to rear side, 6 units, no parking. There are about probably 8 garages that are substandard. You could maybe get a Model T in. Down on Fernando, or not Fernando, but on Harding in Bay across from the Zippies, there's places in there, no garages. A lot of no garage places down there, and there's a lot of garages that aren't being used. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other speakers? All right, I'll bring it back to the council to see if there is action or a motion.
Mayor?
Mr. Selich.
Yeah, I just got a question for Councilman Henn. How was 9th Street selected as the furthest distance from the business district to go, as opposed to Medina Way or going further than 9th Way? How was that selected?
The citizens panel thought that that was the most appropriate area. There was discussion about a different shape of it. They felt like they had to at least capture up above this area of Bay Island. I can't speak for the one street versus the next within a 1 or 2 street. As it relates to Bay Island, that parking garage that they've got is in substitution of the fact that they don't have any place to park their cars in garages in their homes because they can't get cars on the island. So I view that parking garage for Bay Island as analogous to a garage in a home for them, and therefore wasn't troubled by the fact that they would be included in the program.
Mr. Hill?
I would ask a question of staff that if we approve the staff recommendation, what would you anticipate the next steps would be?
We'll be bringing on Nelson Nygaard to help us with the implementation and the field work, and then going back to the BVAC to actually start developing the various programs. The field work is the first step in formulating the residential permanent parking program, so that's going to be the focus for that particular strategy through summer.
And the definition of that field work is?
We anticipate needing to do one weekend during the spring, and they're going to be doing a combination of license plate survey as well as postcard information. The objective is to find out who is parking there and what hours that they are parking there, so that we can understand whether or not they are employees, visitors, residents. So we'll be using various methods to try to understand. And also the fieldwork has to be done both in the residential area as well as the commercial area, so we know where we will be potentially relocating people if we are creating a program.
And then from this field work, you would then design a specific program that may look totally different than what we see tonight, but based upon much more in-depth research and much more community involvement.
Very much so.
And this would come back to the council for review and potentially adoption or modification again at that point in time.
Yes, anticipation has come back to council in the fall after we have it going through the BVAC.
And that's true for the commercial as well as the residential then?
The commercial, the biggest component there is to modify the parking standards, and that would be packaged with the residential permit parking program. So we would present the whole program to the council.
Personally, I guess I don't know if a residential parking permit program would work or would not work. I see it as a very confusing issue, but I certainly think that we ought to get off the dime and try to figure it out. And so I would be in favor of moving forward with this, recognizing that this is going to generate the data to create a much more defined program with community involvement that will then be brought before the council once again.
Councilmember Gardner.
I think that I'm hoping that there's a huge community outreach component, because I know that there are a lot of people that are not aware of this, that something came, they chucked it in the mail and never even opened it, or for whatever reason. And so it's very important, because we've already seen there's some people that are not on board with this, and we have to be sure that the majority are. So what are we going to do besides mailing? Are we going to do another questionnaire? Are we going to do community meetings? Is there something besides the Balboa Village Advisory Committee aspect to it that we are sure we're reaching everybody so they know what's going on with this program?
We anticipate various methods to, as I mentioned, we'll be having 2 workshops, one in the spring, one in the summer.
And how are we publicizing those?
Every method possible I can think of, as far as we have our e-alerts.
Doorknob hangers, maybe?
Doorknob hangers, sure. And also, I know we are kicking off Mind Mixer program that allows us to actually post questions in order for the community to respond to those. It's a new program. It's been used in a lot of other communities. It's been very helpful, and I anticipate the city manager's office will have a big press release to let the public know that programs being made available. So luckily we're dealing with a very focused area, and we have some momentum already in trying to get the word out. So I think we'll continue in that and try and just use various methods to get people informed and understand what we're doing.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll move the item.
Second. Motion second. Further discussion? Please vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, let's move on to item 14, appointments to Environmental Quality Affairs Committee and the Water Quality Coastal Tidelands Management Committee.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay,
We only have 4 applications for EQUAC, which has 7 members under its new formulation. So I would suggest that we extend the application period for what would it be, 2 weeks late, Leilani?
Yeah, I'd recommend at least 2 weeks, because then I can do another publication for this Saturday.
Because if we don't have enough interest, we don't need the committee. But I know that the former chair was out of town, and she really is interested in that sort of thing. So maybe a few others that just, for some reason, didn't get the
All
word.
right, well, there's a motion then to extend these applications for another 2 weeks. Is there a second?
Second. Is that on both?
This is on EQUAC. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. Is there any council discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote. The motion on the table is to extend the EQUAC applications for an additional 2 weeks.
One moment, let me resave the motion. Thank you. Okay, proceed, please.
At the wrong screen to vote. Hang on.
No? Hold on. Okay, there we go. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, so we'll move on now to the appointments to the Water Quality and Coastal Tidelands Management Committee. The city clerk has prepared a ballot that's at your table. I understand we have 9 candidates and 7 positions to fill. Before we vote, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. Is there any staff report or anything to say? Okay, the candidates are before you. Please vote, and then pass the ballot in. And
this is under the assumption also that we're waiving Council Policy A2 that requires 2 per vacant seat. So we
Right.
would initially, okay.
Do we need a motion on that, to do that? Waive Council Policy A2?
Yes, please.
I'll move that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, please vote on that.
One moment again, please. Please go ahead. Mayor Pro Tem Hill, thank you.
I confirm 3 times.
Appreciate that. Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Vote early, vote often.
Okay, in order to be on the committee, you also have to receive at least 4 votes. So for the Water Quality Coastal Tidelands Committee, Councilmember Ed Selich votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Lawrence Houston, and George Robertson. Councilmember Mike Henn votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Lawrence Houston, and George Robertson. Councilmember Daigle votes for Dennis Baker, Louis Denger, Laird Hayes, Jamie Holmes, Lawrence Houston, George Robertson, and Douglas Wood. Councilmember Tony Petros votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Jamie Holmes, Jamie Holmes and George Robertson. Councilmember Gardner votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Lawrence Houston, and George Robertson. Mayor Pro Tem Hill votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Jamie Holmes, and Lawrence Houston. Mayor Curry votes for Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, Jamie Holmes, and George Robertson. With that, we'll take the first one, two. There are 6 members with either 6 or 7 votes. That would be Dennis Baker, Carl Cassidy, Louis Denger, Fred Galuccio, Laird Hayes, and George Robertson, and then the next highest one would be Lawrence Houston with 5 votes. Jamie Holmes received 3, and then Douglas Wood received 1.
4, yeah.
I'm sorry, Holmes received 4, Lawrence Houston received 5, and Douglas Wood received 1. So Lawrence Houston is the next highest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would make 7.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations to those who have been elected, and thank you for your service. And thank you to those who applied and did not get elected, and keep after it, because there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. We'll now turn to item 5, purchase of rescue ambulances and ancillary equipment. Is there a staff report?
Mayor Curry and council members, I certainly welcome your questions on this. We don't have a staff report, staff presentation other than the staff report. This is a high-dollar item, so I put it on current business.
Yeah, well done. Is there any comment from the audience, public comment?
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. I don't doubt the importance of our city having effective rescue equipment, and I applaud our fire department for keeping on top of this. But I would note that the staff report, which I did read, says that the recent budget allotted $178,000 for the purchase of 1 new ambulance, and it now appears a similar vehicle is going to cost us $214,000, or actually a little over $275,000 when it's fully equipped. $275,000 seems at first blush a rather large amount for a single vehicle, but I admit the staff report includes an impressive 60-page list of added extras and features that it needs. Yet, as we all know, government purchases can be easy targets for price gouging, so I hope you, as our public watchdogs, are making sure that there aren't too many $600 toilet seats in here. Primarily, I'm wondering why the cost has increased 20% or more since the previous estimate, and also what will happen to the older ambulances that these are going to be replacing. Are those going to be sold for use elsewhere, and if so, would the revenue from that not be used to offset the new purchase price? And if they're simply going to be scrapped, would it be possible to use some of the existing equipment and transfer it to the new ambulances, thereby reducing the $62,000 it's estimated for supplying all that completely new equipment that we see, I think, in the list? Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment?
Mayor Curry?
Yes.
I had a question.
Councilmember Daigle.
As I understand it, in our city, we have 10 firefighter companies and 3 ambulance companies. Is that the current ratio?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think we'll have to ask the fire chief to let us know. Chief Poster, maybe? Or?
Good evening. Scott Poster, the fire chief. Yes, there's 10 fire apparatus companies and 3 rescue ambulances.
Okay, so given that about maybe close to 90% of our calls are for those medical aid, if there's opportunities in the future to make any adjustments to those ratios, would it be beneficial for the city to, not sell the current ambulances that we're replacing, or are there other reasons we would want to dispose of those ambulances?
Councilwoman Daigle, yes, we're going to auction some of those vehicles because they're mechanically unsound and basically unusable, and we take full advantage of 3 reserve ambulances and 3 frontline ambulances. Oftentimes, the reserve ambulances are put in service as frontline, but due to the mechanical condition of the fleet of ambulances we have is why we're asking for 3 ambulances, because we're having a great deal of problem with mechanical in-service time.
Okay, so we'll have 3 new ambulances, and then what will that bring our current fleet to as far as operational ambulances?
We'll have 3 frontline ambulances and 3 reserve ambulances, which also gives us the opportunity to place additional equipment in service at times of high need.
Okay, thank you.
Another question? I looked through the whole thing, and I didn't see anything, I know this sounds funny, but I didn't see anything about mileage. Are we getting, I mean, is that a consideration of how efficient these are? Because that's obviously a cost of fuel and everything. Is there any comparison with other, when we're looking at them as far as mileage?
That's a good question, Councilwoman Gardner. The mileage of these vehicles some of them does not reach the 80,000 mark as outlined in F9 policy. However, the Ford apparatus we're using is in such poor condition, the actual equipment is just run down and is almost inserviceable. So we need to get rid of that model of equipment, and we're going with a better, more durable piece of equipment that we envision will last 2 to 4 years longer than the equipment we have now.
I didn't phrase my question correctly.
MPG.
Miles per gallon.
Yeah. Oh, miles per gallon.
Yes.
Actually, the miles per gallon, actually, we did look at miles per gallon, but these are heavy rigs, and they are
I know we don't get very high, but I mean, is that at all a consideration? That wasn't in any of the specs. I just wondered if we ever looked at things like that for this kind of equipment.
We did not look at miles per gallon on these issues.
Okay.
But we can in the future.
Or clean diesel or something, huh?
Right.
Any other questions for the chief?
Mayor Curry.
Yes, Mr. Petros.
Just a note to a comment that's been raised. In terms of the cost savings or $600 toilets, it is noted that there were multi-unit discounts. Is that not correct?
That's what we were aiming for, as a multi-unit discount, yes, sir.
And by virtue of purchasing these units now, as opposed to in the future, we're capturing this value today.
The attempt was to capture a savings for having 3 units, yes.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, is there any additional public comment on this matter? Public comment then is closed. Is there a motion?
Motion move the item.
Motion and second?
I'm not sure if I moved, but if I didn't, I'll second.
Okay, then motion by Councilmember Daigle, second by Mr. Hill. Please vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Item 16, Corona Del Mar Transmission Main Pipeline Improvements, award of contract.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. This item tonight comes before you to look at the award of a major pipeline that we have identified in our 1998 Water Master Plan. And tonight I'm going to turn the staff report over to Pat Thomas, our Deputy Director, City Engineer.
Good evening, Mayor Curry and council members. As you mentioned, the item before you is to award the construction contract for the Corona Del Mar Water Transmission Pipeline Project. Some brief background on the project. As Dave mentioned, it has been included in the city's water master plan for several years as part of the ultimate system improvements, and has been in the design process for over a year now. The project is to transport water from the Big Canyon Reservoir into the water distribution system. And primarily the benefits of the project are to increase the pressure in the Corona Del Mar area, provide for additional fire flow in the area, provide for redundancy in the pipeline system that transmits water to and from the Big Canyon Reservoir, and to improve the overall operation and reliability of the system. Scenario map showing you the overall alignment of the project going from the Big Canyon Reservoir down San Miguel Drive and MacArthur Boulevard down to Coast Highway, and then extending in Carnation Avenue from Coast Highway down to Bayview Drive. We've also got some blown-up shots of the alignment of the pipeline as well here in just a moment.
And, of course, you're guaranteeing that there'll be no problems with our traffic flow.
Well, we do have a traffic management plan included as part of the plan, so we will be paying significant attention to traffic flow during the construction. The project includes several different diameter size of pipeline. The largest portion of the project is a 30-inch line going from the reservoir in Pacific View Drive and in San Miguel Drive in San Miguel from Pacific View to MacArthur Boulevard, and in MacArthur from San Miguel to Coast Highway. That steps down to a 24-inch line in Coast Highway from MacArthur to Fernleaf Avenue, and Incarnation from Coast Highway to Bayside Drive. The Jack and Bore section under East Coast Highway is a 24-inch line. That Jack and Bore basically is a tunneling process, so in order to avoid having to do open cut across Coast Highway, we'll basically be tunneling the pipeline under Coast Highway. And then a 16-inch section in Dahlia Avenue and Fifth Avenue. We're also relocating our pressure regulating structure out of the East Coast Highway alignment and moving it down to Dahlia at East Coast Highway. This is a shot of the section of pipeline in San Miguel Drive coming from the reservoir from Pacific View and down San Miguel. And a shot of the section of pipe in MacArthur Boulevard. That's just right outside of the new City Hall building here. And again, down MacArthur to Coast Highway and extending to the east on Coast Highway. And then where the pipeline goes down Carnation Avenue down to Bayside Drive.
Will that pipeline going down Bayside Drive, will that improve the water pressure at 627 Bayside?
It will improve the water pressure in this overall portion of the service area, as I mentioned, also providing for additional fire flow in the area, so multiple improvements associated with this project. This is just a picture of the similar type of pipeline we're installing. It's mortar-lined and coated pipe, steel pipe, and it's fairly large diameter, so you can just get an idea of what this will look like when the project's under construction. The schedule that we're looking at for this project, this evening we're recommending the council award the contract. It'll take a few months to order the pipe and get the contractor mobilized, so we're anticipating that construction would actually start in April or May of this year. And we've allowed for 350 working days to complete the construction, so we're anticipating the construction will be complete in summer of 2014.
Are we doing it through the summer?
Yes, we will. However, we will be looking at staging the construction so that we'll cause the least disruption to traffic, and so we'll most likely start the construction up Pacific Drive to do the work in that area during the summer months, during the non-school months, and then work down towards Coast Highway as we get past the summer.
And the Carnation section, are we just going to have to close off Carnation completely? Or how are we going to handle that?
There will be some lane closure. We won't be closing the street completely, but we will be restricting traffic when that is under construction.
No parking, perhaps?
Most likely taking parking off during the construction, yes.
I'll resist the urge to say it's an even number of years, so we must be digging up MacArthur again. When I was back in Washington this last weekend, a lot of the talk by the federal officials was their, Dig Once program. Are we comfortable that we have all of the utility undergrounding or sewer pipes or anything else? Because I know I'm going to the Sand District tomorrow. We have quite a lot of stormwater improvements that are going to come to town. Do we have everything else that needs to go in that street queued up so we can put it all in at one time?
We have done at least conflict checks as far as the installation of this pipeline goes to coordinate that with other utilities, and if there were any needs to do any other major utility replacements, we would be looking at doing them at the same time. So we haven't identified any other major needs that would go along at this time.
Well, we'll wait till 2016.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hill.
Is this a replacement of an existing line, obviously?
No, this is a new pipeline.
So it's not in the same area as an existing, then?
No.
And an opportunity for damaging other activity while doing this?
Other underground utilities?
Yes.
As I mentioned, we did do conflict checks with all the other utilities. We have shown them to the best of our ability on these plans, and so the contract will be required to avoid any damage to any other currently existing underground facilities.
And just out of curiosity, how deep will this go?
I believe the depth will range anywhere from 4 feet to 6 feet, depending upon where in the alignment the pipe is located.
And then is the pipe structurally sound on its own, or is it encased in concrete for future protection, or how is it?
It is structurally sound on its own. It is steel pipe, welded steel pipe that does have cement mortar lining and coating.
Is this 30-inch pipe the biggest one in your toolbox in the city?
I believe this is the largest transmission main we do have. There are larger lines that the larger water agencies use, but this is the largest line in our system.
And will this be a prevailing wage job?
It was bid as a prevailing wage job, yes.
Mr. Henn, I thought you were smiling because it was finally payback time for Corona Del Mar from projects on the peninsula.
My district this way.
Okay. As far as bid results go, we did open the bids for the project on January 10th. We received a total of 11 bids for the project. Listed on the screen before you are the 4 lowest bids from $4.4 million up to $4.9 million. Of the 11 bids, we actually received some bids that were in the $6 and $7 million range. So these are just the 4 lowest, and as you can see, they are 4 fairly close bids, the 4 lowest. So we think this is a good competitive bid. Our
Just
engineers.
before you go into the, I noticed that the estimate was actually lower. Does this mean we have left our wonderful period where we could get really great deals? Are we seeing a change in the market now, or was it underestimated, or what do you think?
Well, the estimate was slightly below the lowest bid. These estimates have been adjusted to try to meet the current construction market as the last couple of years have progressed now. So, as you mentioned, I think a few years ago the market was even more competitive than it is now.
All right, if there's no further questions, is there any public comment on this matter?
If I can just add one more comment, we did receive a protest on the low bid. One of the other bidders protested that the low bid didn't have the necessary experience and had some issues with their bid. We did research that and determined that the low bidder, T.E. Roberts, did have construction experience of a similar nature as to this project, and that also some of the items in their bid that did look a little bit low compared to the other bid items, they are comfortable and they're willing to stand behind their bid, and they will also be providing bonding for their bid as well. So the staff recommendation is to award the contract to the low bidder, T.E. Roberts.
Is there a motion?
I would so.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right. Please vote. Oh, I did public comment.
Is this system always going to be so slow?
No.
Okay. I don't have a vote screen yet.
Push your button over here on the right. No.
I'll get you back. There you go. Oops.
Thanks.
Down. No.
Oh, mine
There we
voted
go.
for me.
Thank you.
Now
I was just waiting for everyone to vote. The
was
motion
really fast this
carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, item 17, resolution numbers 2013-7, 8, 9, and 10, adopting memorandum of understanding with miscellaneous bargaining units and unrepresented key management compensation plan, resolution number 2311, modifying the report value of the employer-paid member contribution. Mr. Kiff.
So, Mr. Mayor and council members, these are 3 different MOUs with what we would call our miscellaneous bargaining groups. These are not all of, but most of the non-sworn employees that the city hires. I think the staff report is fairly detailed about what this item does. Among other things, it does ask the current employees to pay more towards their pensions, upwards of what is roughly 12.35% of their salary would go towards pensions, which is about, by the end of the contract, about 46% of the total pension cost for that type of employee. It also does try to keep them competitive with the cafeteria plan. That's our health care plan, where the employees get a certain allowance and the entitlement to buy insurance through the city's carriers. As well as offers them a cost of living increase based on, it's capped, has both a low end and a high end based on the consumer price index for urban wage earners. It is our recommendation through the negotiations process that you approve this. Terry Cassidy is here if you have any questions, and otherwise we'd certainly welcome those.
I'd just like to observe that this is actually a really big deal. You know, the governor made a big splash about his proposal to have employees pick up half of what's called the normal cost, which calculates out to, and Terry probably knows better, but roughly 20% of the total cost of the pensions for our miscellaneous employees. Our miscellaneous employees have negotiated with the city in good faith, and they're going to pick up 46% of the total cost of their pensions, nearly half, which I think speaks to the wisdom of the compensation plan that former Mayor Henn brought forward a couple of years ago, and you can see the city is actually implementing that. Some will say, yes, but you're giving raises. Well, that's what you do over the course of a life of a contract, but I would point out that these raises are capped at no more than 2.5%, 2.25% next year, 2% the third year, in an environment where inflation right now is about 3.2%. So our employees have really sacrificed in this, and I commend them for their willingness to work with us in a way totally different than you see in many other cities. And as I was speaking to the other mayors over the course of this week, people were amazed that we were able to get to this point. And so I'm just very proud of the city staff and our employees that we're able to come to this at this point tonight.
Mr. Mayor, I'd echo your comments, and I'd add another perspective to this. Although we've talked in terms of the aggregate dollars of increased cost, and we've tried to show a take-home impact on the employees, as it relates to the take-home impact on the employees, what we're seeing here is that their take-home is going up, but at a rate of less than 1% a year over the life of this contract, which is substantially below inflation. So there's clearly an impact here. And although I can't do a calculation on the cost to the city, which is different than the take-home analysis to employees, but I'm guessing the cost to the city, although we're showing a $3 million aggregate cost increase, if you take that as a percentage of the aggregate of costs that we're talking about here, including both salary and pension cost, I'm guessing that too will be less than 1% per year of increase to the city. So I think no matter how you slice this up, we're doing a pretty darn good job of controlling labor expense for the city here, inclusive of the cost of pension benefits.
Councilmember Daigle.
I would note that this was accomplished through hard work, persistence, and negotiation, and Newport Beach is leading the county as far as having their employees contributing now close to half of their pension, half of the overall pension costs.
Is there any public comment on this matter?
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. At your last meeting here, I said I didn't want to insult you, but I did quote the amount you were paid for being up there as a result of Measure EE. The city attorney seems to have misunderstood my remark, for he asserted that nothing had changed, but something most definitely did change, because what had formerly been a reimbursement for expenses was converted into compensation for service, which we are told makes you no longer volunteer citizens, but official employees of the city entitled to a benefit package like the other employees sitting over here. And again, I don't mean to be flip about this, but the charter remains completely silent about what benefit package you are qualified for. So I continue to wonder if you fall into one of the classes of employees affected by this agreement, and if so, if there's a problem with your voting on it. Does this package of agreements affect your benefits? I would like to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask the city attorney, first of all, to Mr. Mosier's assertion, did anything in Measure EE change the level of compensation or the nature of compensation of any of the members of the city council?
No, it did not. Absolutely not.
And is there anything that precludes us from voting on this labor agreement?
No. This is not going to have an impact on you at all.
All right. So once again, he's simply replaying the politics of the Measure EE campaign that formally ended in November here in late January.
That's absolutely correct.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other public comments? Let me bring it back to the council. Is there a motion?
Before you vote, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to just offer my thanks both to you and to our negotiating team here, led by Terry, and also the folks who are not here, the leaders of the unions. I just wanted to name them and thank them. That's with our CEA group. That's Terry Craig and Cynthia Shintani. with our Prof Tech group, that's Fern Nueno and Mike Wojciechowski. With our lead group, that's Chris Auger and John Partridge. I really think they approached the negotiations in a cooperative way, I think, as Councilmember Daigle noted, and I certainly appreciate that.
Thank you. And congratulations to you and Terry, by the way, for your leadership on this matter. All right, please vote. Do we have a motion?
I'll move the item.
A second? Motion and second, please vote.
With that, the motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Item 18, Resolution 2013-12, adopting a memorandum of understanding with the Lifeguard Management Association. Mr. Kiff.
So very briefly, Mr. Mayor and council members, the Lifeguard Management Association is a group of 13 people that are full-time lifeguards. In 2010, they came to the table and agreed to pay for the entirety of their employment, the employee's side of the pension costs, and that's roughly 9% of salary. These folks are sworn, in other words, they have badges, so they're in a different retirement group than the previous ones. The negotiation period with them has been to try to follow closely to what the fire folks within their same department have agreed to with the city. So there are not additional pension contributions in this contract. There are 2 cost of living adjustments. But again, this is an attempt to be reflective of what was agreed to with the fire MOU.
And David, as I understand it, the Lifeguard Management Association went a significant time without any raise at all. I'm sort of thinking back sort of 2007, 8, 9, thereabouts.
They did, yes.
You know about how long that was? I want to say it was 40-some months, but it was...
Terry thinks it was about 2.5 years.
2.5 years without a raise. Okay. And when we say that they're putting in 9% of their salary into pensions, that equates to about, help me out, I think it's 20-some% of the total cost of the pension.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Is there public comment on this matter? All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Is there a motion?
Move the item.
Motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second. Please vote.
Mayor Curry? Thank you. With Councilmember Daigle voting no, the motion carries.
Thank you. Item 19, Voluntary Separation Incentive Program. Mr. Kiff.
Mr. Mayor Curry and council members, last item on your agenda tonight involves an encouragement, were you to allow it, to provide an incentive for employees that are potentially somewhat close to retirement, but maybe not knocking at the door of retirement, or those that might want to head off and take another position elsewhere, whether it's the private sector or maybe something at home. So this we call this the VSIP, the Voluntary Separation Incentive Program. It basically gives a little bit more beyond what's allowed in the MOUs if someone commits to leaving. And it also does provide a certain amount of time for their health care coverage to transition them to another level of coverage, or potentially when the Affordable Care Act kicks in in California, so that they don't go without health care coverage, and that hopefully will give them a cushion or an additional incentive to want to go out there on their own. What this does, I'll just cut to the quick, is that it allows us to further shrink the size of government here in Newport without having to do it, hopefully, without layoffs. We do think we need to get a little bit smaller. I think I've been candid about that. And my hope is that this will allow us to do that with folks who are willingly leaving the city versus involuntarily leaving the city. I would note we have a different recommended action. I think that staff report is in front of you, which the initial staff report, which was posted, allowed 2 different windows to take the VSIP, and the second window was less generous. This just provides one opportunity and extends the date out a little longer until, I think, March 15th. What that does for us, the employees came back to me and to Terry after seeing the draft of this and said, you know, at the February 12th deadline to decide, was just a little bit too tight to talk with their family members and look at whether leaving early is a good deal for them now. So if you were to accept this, we'd recommend the revised recommendation, which is one opportunity to do it, and you'd have to execute that decision by March 15th. This is all contingent. If this doesn't generate enough excitement or enthusiasm, we don't have to pursue it. So I'm hopeful that it will, and I'd like your authorization to do that, but it's still something that if it doesn't work out, we can take a look at it before actually executing it.
Thank you, Mr. Kiff. This is an important issue as well, because one of the primary ways of controlling our costs is through the reduction of our personnel costs. We've reduced our workforce by 10% over the past few years. We're down at the levels where we were when we annexed the Newport coast, actually, and still providing high-quality city services. And one of the key ways that we were able to do that was with our early incentive program that we offered at the end of 2009. So this is another key element that allows us to continue in that vein to right-size the city and to reduce our operating costs going forward. So I commend the city manager for thinking about this. Is there any council discussion?
Just
Mr. Hill.
Question of clarification. You said that I interpreted your remarks to say the cutoff date was March 15. The documentation seems to be those that qualify between March 15 and June 28.
Maybe make sure Terry can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Hill, employees would have to commit by March 15th that they would retire or separate by June 28th. The intention being that we would know the number before the end of the fiscal year.
And that certainly helps us as we plan your budget, because we'd like to have it adopted in May.
I commend you for creating these kind of programs.
And do I understand correctly, if we just got 3 people that accepted, we're not obligated to go forward with anyone under this program?
I don't see it that way, and certainly I think we need to come back to you with a budget amendment to actually execute it, so it would ultimately come back to you for one more action.
Yeah.
Right, but once we make the offer, we're not obligated to follow through. Or are we? That's what I'm trying to understand.
It's an irrevocable acceptance on the part of the employees. If there's not sufficient cost savings in the opinion of the city manager recommending to the council, then we could undo it, or we could still work out a separation agreement in accordance with our severance or layoff procedure. As Mr. Kiff mentioned, if this doesn't get enough interest, we may pursue other kinds of reductions.
Well, there's one feature of this program that is different than the prior program, as noted in the staff report. The prior program, when people retired, the positions were eliminated, so we were certain of a reduction in the position tracker. But as this program has been presented, individuals on the cusp of retirement may take retirement, but there's also potential, depending on their position, it could be filled. So one of the questions that I had is, it seems as if the pool of people is about 100 employees. Has there been some assessment of those 100 employees? How many jobs are ones that we were likely not to refill?
Well, it's a good question, Councilmember Daigle, and I have to answer it somewhat vaguely, because that's we don't know until we see who decides to go. But let me take an example of a generic, let's say 2 different divisions of Division A and Division B, and you've got the service that Division A does. I'm trying to be very general, because I'm not targeting any group of employees. Let's say half of them decide to retire now, and half in B go. But we decide that one of those things we want to keep in-house, A or B, and one we want to contract. Hopefully, this would allow me to take the remaining people in B and move them into the slots in A, and fully contract out B, if that makes sense. So I can't be much more specific than that.
And although I would hate to contradict my boss, perhaps I can offer a little bit of insight. We have had a number of employees approach Human Resources or their directors and indicate that if this were offered, they would definitely take it and leave city employment earlier than they would otherwise. So we have a general idea of about 20 employees who are interested in the program. However, the Early Retirement Incentive Program, which was disallowed under the new pension reform, you cannot offer any kind of a defined benefit plan. So some of the previous program, the people who took it would be a different mix because most of those people retired and we knew that they were close to retirement. This has a separation option, so you don't have to retire, but you do have to be at least age 50. So I think there will be interest in the program, but who will take it and what jobs will be dependent on the group.
So they separate from Newport Beach, but could continue employment with another agency?
That's correct, but the criteria was age 50 with 5 years in PERS, so we didn't have anybody who would be concerned about leaving our employment, and that's why it's irrevocable, approved agreement by the city attorney's office to make sure there's no comeback, but you do not have to retire. You just have to leave the city of Newport Beach.
And it's not necessarily to another agency, too. Someone could decide they want to have a home-based business they've always wanted to pursue, and they want to do it at that point, or private sector, whatever.
Just a follow up on that. I hadn't thought about that, though. So they could go to work for, say, if they went to work for another city. So how does their pension work then? As they continue, don't we get dinged for that if they keep making more money and that sort of thing?
No, if you're, well, firstly, they'd go in a new PEPRA environment, a state pension reform environment, so they could, it'd be interesting to see what city they decide to go to, but we have our own account with PERS and our own costs associated with PERS, so we pretty much know with our own employees what our obligation is there. This is unlike if you're thinking of where the small cities get together and have a pool and there is a consequence as to a person who leaves your city, sometimes the pool remains obligated for that person's, say, significantly higher compensation somewhere else.
Right. And we don't worry about that.
There's one other component to this program, Councilmember Gardner. The medical expense retirement program that the city set up, our post-retirement reimbursement plan, you must retire in order to be eligible for both sides of that plan. So there is a strong incentive to retire if you're of age. So we're not too concerned about the consequences of the impact on our PERS rates.
Okay. Public comment on this matter?
Mayor Curry and members of the council, my name is Jim Mosier. My concern is basically the same as Councilwoman Daigle's. Although I would say, however, the 2009 incentive program was advertised, I personally noticed that many of the early retirees were almost instantly hired back as contractors to fill their old positions until a more permanent employee could be hired back. I never at the time quite understood if those folks were getting paid twice, but I think it would be very comforting to see that this program somehow was structured so that it is targeted just at positions we know we are not going to have a continuing need for. Thank you.
Mr. Mosier is being overly vague in that, and I think to a position that disadvantages what happened with the ERIP. I think we probably hired 4 people back out of 51 who left, and it was for at most a couple of months to transition that new person replacing them. So many is significantly more to me than 4.
Yeah, and many of those positions, most of those positions were permanently eliminated.
And they ended up being gone, yeah.
All right. Is there further council discussion or a motion?
I move the item.
Motion and second. Please vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Next item, motion for reconsideration.
A motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the city council at either this meeting or the meeting or previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Is there a motion for reconsideration? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.
I'm not sure.
Well, I was